All right, welcome back to the party, everybody. How is everybody doing? I am your host, Lutch, aka TheIndianJesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense, coming to you from the bedroom today. Shout out to King Nirvana. Welcome to the party. Not gonna lie to you guys, I'm not feeling my best, but I told you guys I would come through for a Sunday show, so we're gonna do a Sunday show. Let me just get my chat set up here. As you saw by the thumbnail, we talked about Dwight Shrute. So obviously, real name Rainn Wilson. He does other stuff besides being Dwight, and I actually found out he really hates being associated with Dwight, which is kind of funny. It's like, made you rich, bro. Anyway, he has his own podcast, and he brought on my good friend Alex O'Connor, and they were talking about religiosity, atheism, spirituality, all of that good stuff. And I thought it was really cool because typically when we look at Alex O'Connor's work, you coming over here, Mort? Oh, shout out to the Overlord in the building. Welcome. And of course, guys, every donation comes with a treat for Morty. But I thought it was fun to be able to discuss this, because usually when we see Alex, it's more in like a debate style of content, and this was a lot more chill, and helped to really explore some of those ideas. So without further ado, let's dive right in. As always, guys, if you cannot hear the video, please do let me know.
Not long afterwards, lots of people started to believe he'd risen from the dead. This is one of the most extraordinary events in history. Society is disrupted. As a secular historian, how can you not be interested? I just find these conversations so interesting.
What is the best argument in your infinite number of debates, both online and in person, for the existence of God?
Right. Shout out to DebateCon. Unfortunately, I just got an email that said because of the Islamists, Alex O'Connor has decided not to go. So I'm pretty bummed about that. But there's going to be a bunch of great stuff at DebateCon in 2 weeks in Newark. Come on through if you can. I mean, again, Alex won't be there, but a bunch of other people will.
Hey there, it's me, Rainn Wilson, and I want to dig into the human experience. I want to have conversations about a spiritual revolution. Let's get deep with our favorite thinkers, friends, and entertainers about life, meaning, and idiocy. Welcome to the Soul Boom Podcast.
Hopefully, if you were here on a Friday, then we got ousted out of here. Even though that was completely fair use. Hopefully, that was just a one-off. Because I'm gonna be really frustrated if every single time we try to do something, they shut the stream down. But let's keep those vibes positive.
I was very curious to know what the comments would be, having been on your show. The first ever Baha'i.
Yeah.
It was such an interesting melange of like, oh, what a great conversation. And
so no, it's Saturday and Sunday. So I'm doing the Friday stream, and then I'm gonna have to go. We're not gonna do an after party on that Friday, because I gotta go to bed and get up for 10 a.m. 10 a.m. So it's Saturday, Sunday. So Friday, we good.
A lot of people like, Alex let him off so easy, and he should have skewered him. Who is your audience? I don't even know if I'm going to use this, by the way. But I'm just curious about your audience.
Yeah. It's actually difficult to know, because these days I have a lot of religious listenership. So a lot of Christians listen to my show, for example.
Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to say, is that there was a lot of like Christian backlash against me being a Baha'i. Like, this is against the Gospels.
Oh, really?
Jesus said he's the way and the truth and the light, and there's no way to the Father except through him. So this is blasphemy.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot of the atheists coming in saying this is a bunch of like, God hokum claptrap, unprovable bullshit, ooey gooey Hollywood celebrity bullshit.
I mean, are they wrong? Prove me wrong.
And so it was kind of getting it from both sides. Interesting.
Yeah, well, you're doing something right if you are getting it from both sides.
Yes.
Because you're saying something to upset everyone, which means that you're actually thinking independently and saying what you think, and not sort of being audience captured. The thing is that I think when a channel gets to a certain size, unavoidably, there are going to be people who are annoyed or upset by basically anything you do. So in my case, I very regularly have people on the show or make a video myself where I'm maybe soft on Christianity, or I say, you know what, actually, there are some good, like, evidential cases to make for the resurrection of Jesus. I don't think they're sufficient enough, but here's some great evidence. And somebody will come in and say, I can't believe we've lost Alex to the hippy dippy, soft.
Right.
And it's like, okay, man, but like the channel is growing. It's obviously resonating with people. I'm speaking honestly. What more do you want from me? I think in this case,
I can definitely, even at my tiny size of the channel, not my height, but I can definitely understand, even at my size, how there is this audience capture where it's like, okay, I want to make sure whatever we're doing is something that you guys like. But the whole purpose is to show you what I like. And so finding that balance, even at this stage, is very, very difficult. But if you're getting it from both sides, you're doing something right.
it's obviously resonating with people. I'm speaking honestly. What more do you want from me? I think in this case, when we did our show, I pulled a couple of clips first. And one of the clips was you talking about how you tried being an atheist and it didn't work for you. And the video was cool. I tried being an atheist. It didn't work. And I suspect that a great many people commented without watching the full video. But even if they did, the problem is that you were talking about your personal experience. You were saying, look, I tried this philosophy, and you even say in the video, I don't mean like philosophically or anything. I just mean like as a person, emotionally, like it didn't work. There's nothing to critique in there. You're just telling a story of what happened to you.
Yeah.
Right? So people in the comments, somebody said like, well, I tried religion and it didn't work. And it was, kind of people like, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, okay, good for you too. All we're doing is we're sharing our experiences here.
Some people will say, I tried being a Catholic, it didn't work. I tried being a Buddhist, it didn't work.
That would come across a lot more easily. But exactly the thing that I've had to learn about being an atheist who wants to play in this Christian sandbox, so to speak, is not trying to take religion away from anybody, but just to tell my own story and demonstrate my own morality by just living out and doing the things that I do, and show that even though I don't have a God belief, I am still able to be a decently good person. I mean, I'm not perfect by far. Shout out to Ruthless Admin. Welcome to the party. Very good to see you, sir. Dwight Shrute is taking on Alex O'Connor here. No, it's going to be a little more chill than that, but very, very interesting anyway.
Sharing our experiences here.
Some people will say, I tried being a Catholic, it didn't work. I tried being a Buddhist, it didn't work.
And if people don't understand that so much of what they believe is actually a result of how integrating those beliefs makes you behave, makes you feel. If people think that they're acting purely rationally, that every single decision they make about their worldview and their opinions about the world are purely sort of analytical, syllogistic reasoning, then I think they're either telling the truth, in which case they're missing something incredibly important about the human experience, or they don't realize just how much their emotional states are creeping into their rational thought.
You are infamously began your career on the internet as a new atheist firebrand, kind of the youngest of the lot.
I'm so glad that is a thing of the past, because as much as I was, in it, the new atheism of like the early 2000s into like 2010 and stuff, as much as I personally definitely needed that firebrand, like, this is why religion sucks. I'm very glad that I was younger during that. I'm very glad that I wasn't this age when that was popular, because I definitely would have been caught up in that a lot longer. And I think the fact that it did happen when I was younger allowed me to realize, oh, this doesn't really work to get my message across. And as we'll see, Alex, same kind of thing.
A new atheist firebrand, kind of the youngest of the lot. And at the same time, you seem to have a almost religious fervor for the Bible and Christianity. What is it that obsesses you about the Bible and the Christian mythology?
Great question, because that's one thing that I don't think I will ever be able to be that person that sits down and studies the Bible for the purpose of debunking it or this, that, or whatever. When I never read it growing up as a Christian, and then once I finally did, I was like, okay, I see what that is. It's not what it was represented to me to be. But Alex just knows it inside and out, and it's wild how much he's interested in it.
What is it that obsesses you about the Bible and the Christian mythology?
The Christians will tell you it's the Christian equivalent of what the Muslims call fitra, the sort of inherent desire or drive that a person is born with towards God, and that I'm being sort of whispered to and then through the scripture. I don't think it's that, partly because I'm so critical of the text. It is the only ancient text with which I have enough familiarity to talk about meaningfully. Some people get obsessed with the Odyssey or Metamorphoses or something. And I think part of the interest is, can we be sure that Homer wrote this? You know, can we figure out why? Can we figure out how people interpreted the story at the time? Did the Greeks really believe in the existence of their gods? These are interesting questions, but questions that I don't really have anything to say about because I don't know their stories very well. With the Bible, I spent so long in the new atheist school of thinking that religion is harmful and definitely untrue that I learned a thing or two about the Bible.
But even, I would say, more than that, you studied theology.
That's true. That's true.
So that's taking a big step other than becoming vaguely familiar with the Gospels.
But, you know, like there's a level to which when you are in the new atheist sort of firebrand spirit, you think, okay, I'm going to learn about this religion because I want to have better discussions and better debates. And then something shifts and I'm like, look, it's so simplistic to say religion is bad. I think saying religion is bad is like saying politics is bad. Kind of makes sense, and you can make some case. You could give some grand speech saying politics, it drives families apart. And can you name one war that wasn't caused by politics? It's so terrible. And that's kind of true.
That's a very interesting point that I hadn't even heard before, where, you know, I don't necessarily hinge on this aspect of like all war is caused by religion. And so, I mean, it definitely was. And I think dogma is the real culprit and not specifically religion. But yeah, that is a very interesting way to put it. Like, have you any issue that hasn't started with politics? It doesn't mean politics is bad. It just means that, you know, like apparently the way we're using it is not ideal.
Apart. And can you name one war that wasn't caused by politics? It's so terrible. And that's kind of true, but it seems trivially true. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a correct political position. And it doesn't mean that you should abstain from doing politics.
Or that humanity needs politics to a certain level, to a certain degree. Exactly. We have to govern and we have to find discourse and ways to legislate.
So I think it's pretty naive. And then I'm left in a position where I no longer think I can make this surface level simplistic firebrand atheist case, but I also am now just really interested in the Gospels. Because once you've spent so long learning about this kind of stuff, when somebody comes along and says, hey, have you ever noticed this about the text? It just is interesting to me because this is something that I've known about for years, and here's something new that I'm discovering. So I just fell into this. I don't know. The only way I can describe it is a bit like how people get interested in all kinds of texts. People have their favorite play or something like that.
I'm going to push back a little bit. I find that a little disingenuous that you're saying the reason I'm interested in the Gospels is it's the thing I'm the most familiar with. I could be familiar with, you know, the work of, you know.
In fairness, there aren't like
Zarathustra.
I mean, I kind of agree. I'm going to keep calling him Dwight, but I kind of agree with Rainn here in the sense that it is very convenient to act like, well, if this just happens to be my thing. Does that mean that that's not the case? Of course not. But it seems like there is definitely an aspect of, well, this stuff matters to everybody. It's not just that it's interesting to me. It's because it is so central to so many people's lives. It became more interesting. I think that somewhere, you know, not to put words in Alex's mouth, but that seems a little bit closer to what he's saying. You guys, really quick, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that like button. It helps so very much. Thank you. Or the Epic of Gilgamesh or something. But
there aren't world religions that have sprung up that are as relevant to people I interact with today around something like the.
So there's a certain level of relevance to it as well.
Because also, I do philosophy more broadly. I talk about ethics. I talk about free will. I talk about all of this kind of stuff. And in doing that, people always come to the table with religion. It always comes up. You know, you're talking about big questions with people. Around half of them are probably going to be religious, and some of them are going to be.
That's kind of what I was saying. Is that it's not just that. Oh, this is interesting. Just like some people like Spider-Man.
Christian, and I just find these conversations so interesting.
It's fascinating talking about this with you. Really, I'm truly fascinated, and I love getting a non-Christian's perspective on the gospel because I try and dive in occasionally on my own and understand it, and it's so difficult to separate it from canon. You know,
yeah, and please take my words with a pinch of salt.
Sure,
your listeners should if I've said something that's an egregious error, you know, don't blame Rainn. I'm just a guy. I'm just an atheist.
We're having a conversation. What do I know? I'm just a stupid sitcom actor, but.
And the other thing too is the dedication, the theology of the Bible, of Christianity. There is a lot there, and so it's one thing to be interested in it, but it's another thing to actually go down, you know, the rabbit hole, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, as much as I care about this, it's, you know, similar to a point that I was bringing up the other day that. It's when you leave that militant atheist phase and you're angry about it, then it kind of just fades away in terms of, you know, that's not really a part of my life anymore. only because I have the channel and I specifically talk about those things as it come up. But outside of this, I rarely am ever really thinking about Christianity. That doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about larger things, but the Christianity is just not the framework that I think of it. And I think that's most non-believers. Most atheists are not like Alex, obviously.
We're having a conversation. What do I know? I'm just a stupid sitcom actor. But I did want to pick your brain about atheism. And I know right now I would call you kind of a spiritual atheist. Is such a thing possible? Can one be a spiritual atheist?
Sure.
How would that work?
I'm never quite sure what someone means.
Absolutely. I am a spiritual atheist. Well, what do you mean by that? That's its own conversation. But absolutely, yes.
Atheist, is such a thing possible? Can one be a spiritual atheist?
Sure.
How would that work?
I'm never quite sure what someone means by spiritual. Like, do you mean like has a spirit or believes that?
An atheist that incorporates kind of transcendent emotions into a larger kind of heart-based compassion.
I would say
I love how Alex pushed back on the word spiritual, because like all the so many other words in this area, they just kind of have a nebulous meaning. Even God, and like we always say, God is very bad at being a word because it doesn't elicit my thoughts into your head. It just elicits your own thoughts. When I say God, you don't think of what I think of as God or what he thinks of as God. You already only think of it in that way. And so spirituality, or being spiritual, or the spirit, falls in the same category. And so without being schmarmy and be like, well, what exactly do you mean by, I don't even know what that word means. He gave an answer to, what clearly Rainn was looking for, but then clarified that, well, I mean, it really depends on what you mean by that. I like it.
To transcendent emotions, operates kind of transcendent emotions into a larger kind of heart-based compassion. I would say into their belief structure and way of living.
I would argue that there's almost two different sides of this. That you have the atheists who are as spiritual as any religious person, and then you have the atheists on the other side that just don't think about this stuff at all. Whereas, people who are passively religious might believe in certain things and they might pray, but it may not be as huge of a driving factor in their life. Whereas if you're an atheist and you don't have that background of religion, you are forced to either become that person who just has no anything, or figure out your own moral structure. Very, very interesting.
Passion, I would say, into their belief structure and way of living.
I leave room for it. I don't believe in anything transcendent of the material, but I haven't ruled it out, and I'm not a materialist in the sense of saying there is only the material.
Are you now considering yourself an agnostic?
Yeah, I think
is that a cop out? A lot of people would say.
I think it is. I remember I was listening to this in the car, so I remember this part a little bit, and I get very specific about when people calling themselves atheists, and when they're atheists. People don't like to use the word atheist because people typically misuse the word atheist to mean I believe that there is no God. That's not what atheism means, and so it can trip you up in conversations when people think that. And so a lot of people would just, oh yeah, I'm agnostic because I don't really know. But what you're really saying is that I'm agnostic atheist. I don't know, but I don't have a belief. Let's see where he goes with it.
Considering yourself an agnostic?
Yeah, I think
is that a cop out? A lot of people would say, like, Sebastian Junger came on the show and he's like, it's a bullshit cop out. You're either an atheist or you're a theist. Of course there's an agnostic. We can't know anything. We can't know any truth. What do you think?
Exactly.
Well, I've heard people say that, and usually it's an atheist of the type of Christopher Hitchens who wants to say that, agnostics are just atheists without a backbone or something. It's like, okay, man, I still don't know if God exists. Like, that is just true. I don't know. It would be maybe a
right, which is the agnostic part. But when you stop at agnostic, you are just saying you don't know whether there's a God or not. If you have the position, or rather, if you don't have a position that God does exist or God doesn't exist, then I don't understand why the capitulation. I don't get it. And it makes it harder for all the rest of us that want to use the proper word when you're muddying the water.
I was intentionally like calling myself one just for like better PR or something. But if anything, it has the opposite effect, because I get a lot of flack for not being too firm in a permanent position. As I like to say, I will die on this fence. I think it is the most reasonable position to hold, especially because there are so many levels of agnosticism. It's like, okay, is it that you don't know? Is it that you think that it's unknowable? Because it could be that, like,
Streaming. Are we back? Okay, we're back. We're back. I think we're back.
I'm agnostic about whether it's raining outside.
Yeah.
But I believe we could go and find out with a little bit of effort if it's raining outside. But there's a kind of agnosticism which says you can't know, right? So I could be an agnostic in the sense, like, my some random uncle of mine or something who's never really thought about theology would probably say, if I were to ask, like, yeah, I guess I'm an agnostic, I don't know. But that's just because, I haven't looked at the arguments. If I have a look, I'll figure it out. There are others who have studied all of the arguments, still say they're agnostic, but because they think you won't be able to get to an answer, right? And it's a difference saying, I just don't know and I can't know. But there's also an agnosticism that comes about as not knowing what someone's talking about. Do you believe in God? I was like, what do you mean by God? What do you mean by God? Really?
Was that his Jordan Peterson? Well, it depends on what you mean by God. So, okay, this is very interesting. Because he's not saying, he's not using it as a cop-out. What he's saying is, I don't even know if I can believe in the thing that you're talking about, because I don't know what that is. Damn. I am so mad I'm not going to be able to meet this dude. Very interesting. So I have to sit with that. And, like I keep telling you guys, if you give me something that forces me to change my mind, I will sit here and change my mind. But it's hard to argue with that. If you're talking about the Christian God, if you're talking about Yahweh, if you're talking about Allah, if you're talking about one of those, then I can say, yes, I am an atheist in the sense that I don't have a belief in those things. But I am not somebody who's a strict materialist. I do believe there could be something. I personally wouldn't call it a God, but I also don't know what I would call it. Am I only an agnostic? Am I not an atheist anymore? What just happened?
I was like, what do you mean by God? What do you mean by God? Really? It's that annoying.
I don't think Rainn got the Jordan Peterson impression.
Agnosticism that comes about is not knowing what someone's talking about. Do you believe in God? I was like, what do you mean by God? What do you mean by God? Really? It's that annoying Petersonian question, but you need to know. The classical, like, Thomist philosophers will say that God is being itself. God is just being. What the hell does it mean to say that being doesn't exist? What does that even mean?
Exactly. That's why God is not a very good word.
It's like a contradiction. But if you think that God is just being, then you could, as an atheist, be like, yeah, okay, well, I believe that stuff exists, and I guess that makes me a pantheist or something. And it all starts getting muddy and confused.
Sure.
So it's like, okay.
We talked about this before in the limitations of language.
Yeah, it's like ask me, like, define the thing you want to know if I believe in, and ask me if I believe in it, and I will tell you to the best of my ability whether I can or I can't. But if somebody says,
I love that. Define the thing you're asking me if I believe in, and then I can tell you if I believe in it or not. Because, stepping back, I still haven't gotten a good definition for what would make a God outside of specifically the Christian Bible. So if you're saying Yahweh, yes, I'm an atheist, but goddamn. I guess in general, I'm going to have to go back and call myself agnostic, only because I don't know what it is that you're asking me if I believe in. Good job, Alex.
Believe in, and ask me if I believe in it, and I will tell you to the best of my ability whether I can or I can't. But if somebody says that agnosticism is just a cop-out, well, I think that's a rhetorical cop-out. I think they're just sort of saying something that's a bit sort of spicy and fun and makes you sound like an edgy atheist, but is actually indicative of either not understanding or purposefully misrepresenting the position of...
Wow. That has changed my entire outlook just on these last 6 sentences. Nirvana said, can you be just atheist when it comes to the mainline religions and maybe an agnostic on the rest? Yeah. So again, going back to what Alex just said, define what you are asking me if I believe in first. Then I can tell you to the best of my ability if I know, or if I what it is. And so yeah, exactly what you're saying. So like if you come to me and ask, what is your position on Yahweh? I'm an atheist. I'm an agnostic atheist, where I still believe that it is possible that Yahweh could exist, but I don't have I don't hold a belief in that theistic God. Now, it still is the case that I don't have a belief in any theistic God, but the thing is, whatever it is that I believe exists, if that is technically a theistic God, I don't think it is, but I could be very wrong, then I'm not actually an atheist. Yeah, it depends on the context. I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys realize how huge that is for my entire worldview, but I really have to question, am I actually an atheist? I don't know.
Indicative of either not understanding or purposefully misrepresenting the position of the agnostic.
Now, you said before that you don't believe in anything beyond the material. And in our previous conversation, I described kind of my definition of God as being much more akin to something like beauty or truth.
Right. And so going back to what he's saying, of course beauty exists. Of course truth exists. You know, a lot of people say God is love. Of course love exists. So if that's what we're talking about, then I'm not an atheist on those things. But again, I don't know what you even mean, so I have to stay agnostic. God damn.
Even love. Have you ever been in love?
Yeah.
You've been in love. You've felt deep love
for
a partner, a romantic partner?
Yeah.
And have you felt it for a family member?
Yeah. I mean, you know, one always wants to say, I think so, because I imagine that, for example, when you have a child
I feel
for the first
so.
time, and yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
Okay.
But I can kind of imagine
think that you have felt love.
I'm okay. So how do we? Where's the non-binary joke in here? So I'm theism fluid. I don't know. It was there. You got the, but together. I see you.
Okay.
But I can kind of imagine
think that you have felt love, but you don't know that you've felt it on the kind of a level of like having a child or something.
That's what I mean. It's like, I'm sure.
Definitely not on the level of having a child, but if we're talking about romantic love, I think, is it, I mean, maybe I'm wrong again, but I think it should be pretty solid for you to be able to determine, based on what other people do and think and say that they feel when they say love. I think that's close enough to say, yes, I've been in love, if you have felt that. But it brings up the same issue with the word God. It's like, well, I mean, is love the only, as far the exact feeling that you have for a child, just like your own child, not on some weird shit? I don't know. Shout out to Dylan Sue. Welcome to the party. Very, very good to see you guys. Can you do me a huge favor? Let me get 4 more likes, and I'll be a happy boy. Welcome. My mind is getting blown by Dwight Shrute and
kind of a level of like having a child or something.
That's what I mean. It's like, I'm sure that when you have a child, it
changes the paradigm.
I had a Christian friend who recently had a child and said that having a child made them suddenly understand not the sacrifice of Jesus as sacrificing himself, but the sacrifice of the Father sacrificing his only son. It was like, I've just unlocked this whole new understanding of what it means to love a son. That
I had a new understanding of God and the divine when I had a child. I didn't have it. My wife had it, and my wife and my child almost died in childbirth. And it was a horrific story. And it was in the middle of the night and in a hallway in the emergency room in a hospital in Van Nuys, California. It was.
Shout out to where we at, Pizzard of Waz. Welcome to the party. Said, hey man, I'll like for you. Thank you. Shout out to Pizzard of Waz. Welcome to the party. And of course, if you guys are new here, make sure you subscribe. I am live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern down in the studio. Just figured I'd come to you from the bedroom. Welcome.
Of the night and in a hallway in the emergency room in a hospital in Van Nuys, California. It was utter childbirth nightmare that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Everyone survived. It came out great. And I held my son in one of the most profound moments of my life in this hallway at 4 a.m., having him almost die and being brought back from death. And there I was, and I looked him in the eyes, and I felt a kind of love on a level that I had never experienced before. And it made me understand God in a different way, because the idea of a judgmental God, a punishing God, a God that is scowling and looking down on us and keeping little marks of what we've done wrong. And that if someone sins or errs, they're going to be cast out or punished or smited or sent to hell or something like that, becomes preposterous.
Yeah.
Because when you love this child so much, of course, there are consequences to behaviors. You know, when my son did some nefarious activities here and
oh Jesus. Yeah, I like that. I like that aspect of this discussion where we're talking not about the truth of the actual claims, but more in a Jordan Peterson style, the importance of the value of the story is something that I've really learned over trying to do this and trying to establish that yes, we can have secular morality that can be for religious people or it can be for atheists, but works for everybody, at least in America. The biggest thing I've learned is that story, that aspect of story, and something for people to buy into. And I got really mad when I called into the Tim Pool show, and he told me exactly the same thing, but didn't quite explain it, and I didn't understand. And the idea is that even if Christianity is not true, the components of the story are enough to help move you in the right direction. The problem with that is that some of us have tried everything we can to buy into the story, but the lack of truth is preventing that. And so again, if we can extract the value from the actual truth claim and just build on that, I think everybody wins. Nobody's religion is taken away, and no atheists still have a reason to be good people.
my son did some nefarious activities here and there in his teenage years. There were consequences to it, but the love never wavered. And the idea of some kind of like undying punishment from me to this beautiful little creature that had come into the world was beyond the possibility. And then I'm just a unemployed sitcom actor with a mediocre podcast. What do I know? But let alone the divine being, Father, creator of love itself. How much love, how much intimacy, closeness, and light does this, this essence hold us all? The idea.
Shout out to and welcome. So, how do you determine what is and is not true? Through empiricism. The same way we've determined how we can get people flying in the sky and talk to each other through pieces of metal and other shit. Science. We use empiricism. Again, not the science, not somebody who did a study once said a thing so that we listen to that, but we have the mechanism of testing a hypothesis, saying if this is if X leads to Y, then and we want to get to Z, then getting from X to Y is a good place to getting to Z. You just fill in what we're talking about. And depending on what you are asking about will be more or less difficult on determining if it's true. And of course, the higher you go, the harder it is. But the stronger the foundation is, we know that 2 + 2 = 4. We don't have to question that. And not because we dogmatically believe somebody told us that 2 + 2 = 4. We can see if you take two, you do that, you got 4. Same exact process all the way up.
And light does this, this essence hold us all. The idea of like some kind of punishment or smiting then just becomes ludicrous. So it did for me shift my perspective of the divine.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Well, and that again, I love to hear the stories like this, where it isn't somebody becoming a Bible thumper, it isn't someone becoming a militant atheist. That these ideas are so central to who we are as people that where they come from and what the exact influence on them is really just not that important. Because of course it's not a across the board Christian thing that if you have a child that your notion of a loving father completely changes to what Rainn was just talking about. But that can work. That can give you that.
For me, shift my my perspective of the divine.
Yeah, and there are things which experience gives you that you just can't quite put into words. I mean, William James famously tried to sort of analyze what religious experience is, and he comes up with these. I think there are like 4 qualities, and one of the qualities of religious experience is its ineffability. that you cannot put it into words. You can't explain it.
See, again, I would be able to make a perfectly perfect How I Met Your Mother joke, but you guys suck.
It's something that you literally just can't explain. It's like taking psychedelics, right? If you take psychedelics and you try to explain what it's like, you can kind of get halfway there, but there is a kind of knowledge that consists in experience.
I heard it in an interview.
Facts. Absolute facts. Anybody who's ever done anything in the psychedelic realm, it's so funny how people who've never done it will try to anchor their understanding in drinking or smoking weed. And it's just it's such a different experience that there are no words, at least that I understand, that could articulate that experience. And that is a very similar thing to when people talk about how they understand God. And there's something there. There's something there about experiences, what is possible, what our brain can do, and why it all points to the same direction, but not everybody is thinking the exact same thing. Because if it was a clear line, like even if you look at DMT, or you talk about the DMT elves, like that's enough of a specific thing where lots of people independently take DMT and they see the elves. I've never been fortunate enough to partake, but it's something more solid. If that's the best that we have of God, and I don't know why the most religious people aren't just sitting around doing DMT trying to figure out what the elves want. But it's a matter of bringing that into focus. What is it that we're doing? We need to figure this thing out. We want to see, is this thing true? And so if we're still at the agnostic phase where we don't even know what we're asking about, how could we possibly determine if it's true or not?
That you did, and I was listening to a clip of it, and you were talking about, like, imagine someone trying to write an essay about the color blue.
Yeah.
You could know a little bit. It could give you some clues into the color blue, but if you've never seen color before and you grew up in a gray room or you were colorblind or whatever, and all of a sudden you had access to color, seeing the color blue is a very different experience than reading about the color blue.
Yeah, this is a thought experiment called Mary's Room. So you imagine Mary in this room, but you can make it even worse, because you can say, imagine that Mary in this black and white room that she's born in has access to everything that ever even could be written or uncovered or understood about the color blue. All the science that we yet to discover, all the color theory, everything that could even be known. She has it all written down. She studies it all. And then she steps outside and she sees something blue. The question is, does she learn something? It seems like the answer.
Ooh, I want to, do we have enough time to make a poll out of that? I don't know. That's such a central question. I remember hearing about this thought experiment when I was studying philosophy. And this is about qualia. Qualia being the experience of experiencing something. So, like, there is something, what it's like to be Morty. Like, he's sitting here, he's sleeping, but there is something that is that experience. Whereas we could argue that if we're talking about a rock, it's very likely that there is no such thing of the experience that is being a rock. And so what they're asking about here is the experience of seeing blue. Is that different than understanding the wavelengths and where it falls in the rainbow and all that stuff? I would argue abso-fucking-lutely.
She steps outside and she sees something blue. The question is, does she learn something? And it seems like the answer is yes. And if that's the case, then there is a kind of knowledge that consists in experience.
That is best.
And love is like that.
And that points us to love, because I think that love is the greatest kind of analogy to God. And you said, I don't believe in anything kind of transcendent beyond the material. Do you believe that love is merely kind of neurons and endorphins in the brain?
Yes. Hold on. Yes. But that is what gives it the spiritual aspect. That just by our own brains doing what it already does, I can be in the experience of looking at another person and feeling love. Just because when you say merely, you're undercutting the fact that it is what it is. If you've been in love, you understand how powerful that is. But to say it's just what's in your mind, going back to the DMT elves, for all we know, it's just in your mind. And if we want to go a step down and say we're talking about acid or shrooms or something, you see weird shapes and whatever, that is just in your mind. But does that take away from the experience that you're benefiting from? I would say no, not at all.
Is merely kind of neurons and endorphins in the brain united with some kind of DNA kind of like impetus towards propagation of the species?
Now, that's a genuine mystery, because I think that's tied up to the question of consciousness more broadly. I don't have any problem saying that the experience of love is something like a feeling. It's something that you very strongly feel.
Am asks, can you visualize in your mind? Yes. And do you have internal dialogue? Unfortunately, yes. It will never, ever, ever shut up. I forget. I was just no. I was gonna say coprophagia, but that's dogs eating their own poop. I was just reading something about how there's different levels of people being able to visualize in their mind, where it's like, okay, if I tell you to visualize Dwight's facial expression here, you see it, and then I take it away, and now I say, like, you could very likely see that in your mind. Some people will have, a vague memory of, what they've seen from The Office. Some people will be able to recreate that image almost exactly. And apparently the same thing happens with internal dialogue, and that scares the shit out of me. Yeah, like, I don't know how. I mean, again, as much as I would love to be able to turn the goddamn internal dialogue off, not being able to access it would freak me the fuck out. Like, what's happening up there? What's happening up there?
That the experience of love is something like a feeling. It's something that you very strongly feel. And so if you're going to be a materialist about consciousness in general, you can say that love is just one of those feelings that is neurons in the brain, but not specific to love, just specific to feeling anything. I find it very strange to say that not that the feeling of love or the seeing of blue is correlated with brain activity, but that is the brain activity. Yeah. That love is the same thing as the neurons firing in my brain when I feel love. I'm not interested in what the brain's doing. I'm interested in the experience that correlates with that brain activity.
Okay, so bringing us back to if you're learning something, the first, all the facts about blue, yet we're using the word learning here. And I think that might be different, because absolutely, Mary coming out of the room and seeing blue for the first time, she is absolutely gaining an experience. Is she learning something? I would say yes, but not in the same sense that we're talking about learning about love. Because again, you could bring it down to something more simple. And if we talk if we talk about hunger, then that's and a feeling in general, that you don't have to separate the biological desire of asking your body for food and hunger. I don't know. Hopefully he's gonna clear this up, because he's got my brain scrambled. And said, it's very interesting. I didn't know some people can't or don't. My friend doesn't, and now I just think he's a potato head. I mean, no. I mean, apparently it's not correlated with intelligence, but I just can't see it any other way. I just can't see it any other way. I can answer that question. Not much is happening up there. Is my head or your head?
What the brain's doing. I'm interested in the experience that correlates with that brain activity. If the experience of seeing blue is just neurons firing in my brain, if that's what blue...
I'm just going to say real quick, I feel smart. I feel smart just by tying this back to the blue thing, even when before he said it.
If the experience of seeing blue is just neurons firing in my brain, if that's what blue is, I should be able to cut open your brain and find blue in there somewhere, but you can't. There's something called blue, this experience that you have, which goes alongside the brain activity, but is not the same thing as it. That is the greatest mystery for materialists to explain, which is why I'm agnostic. That's why I say I leave room for this. I don't say I'm a materialist. The biggest challenge for that is consciousness.
Well, one of the biggest...
Believe nothing except that anything is possible. So I'm still trying to sit with this notion of when I technically am an atheist and when technically I'm not able yet to be an atheist, because that which being defined and asked if I believe in it has not happened. So it's like, technically, if you ask me if I believe in blue blah, and I don't know what that is, then I would, and I have to say either I do believe that, I don't believe in that, or I don't know. I would say I don't know, But there's also that aspect that he's talking about where, like, I don't know even what that is. So maybe Blue Bot is something. Maybe Blue Bot is just somebody else's word for my dog Morty. In which case, I absolutely believe in Morty. I believe in him so much. And that's why wow, this is huge. That is why I have to stay away from using atheist if we're talking about in general. That's wow. God damn.
I leave room for this. I don't.
I'm saying here. Am said, yeah, I'm sure he's not. Wait, let me read from over here. Yeah, I'm sure he's not, but maybe that's why I'm always making faces when people talk. Now, I wonder if he keeps a straight face. I don't know. Our brains are very interesting in how it progresses towards a belief. Hell yeah, that is, you know, a lot of that is how I came to start questioning my beliefs in anything, you know, not religion even specifically, but how do I know the things that I know? You know, we get into the Cartesian, I think, therefore I am. But yeah, breaking down and deconstructing your understanding of what you do, what you believe, who you are, all those things. You know, there's a lot of processing there that's just beyond these are the facts, and it's a lot.
History for materialists to explain, which is why I'm agnostic. That's why I say I leave room for this. I don't say I'm a materialist. The biggest challenge for that is consciousness.
Well, one of the biggest disservices that atheists, I feel, do to themselves and to their cause, because atheists can be extremely evangelical, is this idea that consciousness is an illusion. You know, it's a Daniel Dennett kind of thing. Like we're getting all of these inputs, and our brain makes them become a totality of experience, but it's all illusory. Including,
yeah, I agree. And this notion of nothing is anything, man. Like my truth is my truth. That shit is where you go off the rails, not because of the fact that the truth claims of Christianity are so accurate, but because all of the other things about Christianity, the story, the values, all those things will keep you from being that far off. And I think if definitely myself, but atheists in general, if we get better at articulating how we're not in conflict, like that's not a direct conflict with Christianity. It's not a direct conflict with religion. It's two sides of the same coin, looking for the truth. We're all just looking for what is really real.
Emotion, and that free will is also an illusion, but that, you know, between our DNA and between our neurons firing and our background and our B.F. Skinner kind of behavioralist way that we've grown up in our culture, you know, any choice that we're seeming to make has actually been pre-wired into our cognition.
Pick a color or pick a flavor of ice cream. This, I mean, hey, maybe Alex will change my mind on two gigantic things about my entire worldview in one podcast. Let's see.
But if atheists hold to consciousness is an illusion and there's no such thing as free will, you're not going to gain a lot of converts because.
Okay, well, let's stop there. So Dwight was saying, if you are pressing or you're pushing, there's no consciousness and there's no free will, you're not going to get a lot of converts. But that's three different points. So let's see about number one. Do I agree that consciousness is an illusion? No. Do I believe that free will exists? No. Am I willing to convert people not telling the truth? Also no. So I'm okay with the truth not being the most palatable thing. I didn't make the truth. The reality is what it is. I think the better we're able to swallow those hard truths, the better we're able to do anything we want in life. And if we're talking about getting closer to the source or getting closer to God or getting closer with each other, better understanding consciousness or any of those things, I think the truth about these things is hugely important. So he is right. He is right that not a lot of people want to hear that essentially you're made of stuff and you're an automaton and you know, not a lot of people want to hear that. But it doesn't make it not true. And again, I don't personally believe that consciousness is an illusion. I just don't think we understand exactly what it is. And I think it's, you know, they call this the mind-body problem. That, like, is consciousness just, you know, like this wire in your brain and that wire in your brain, you know, connecting? Or is there something outside of the physical meat stuff of your brain that is what gets out, the experience of being you, your qualia. I don't know. That's tough. Let's see what let's see where he goes with that. Because again, he's right. But this goes back to a debate I had where what I don't know. I don't know. It was some religious debate, and people. It was a bunch of us. We were talking about how the aspect of lying to Christians to make it seem like I accept them. And it's like, well, hold on, wait. Maybe you don't accept Christians for being Christian, but I'm not lying when I say I accept Christians as they are. And so I gotta go with the truth, baby, as best as I know it. As best as I know it.
And there's recognition. But if atheists hold to consciousness is an illusion and there's no such thing as free will, you're not going to gain a lot of converts. Because if you go to a random house over here in Thousand Oaks, California,
have you heard the bad news?
Like, hey, by the way, guys, your experience of being a human being, memories and growing up and falling in love and breaking your leg and losing your uncle and seeing the Mona Lisa for the first time. By the way, that's all an illusion. Yeah. And in fact, you didn't even really experience that. And you didn't even choose to go to Italy and go see the Mona Lisa. That was all chosen for you in a variety of different ways.
Yup. So exactly as it's laid out there, you can imagine why, if that is actually what you believe, especially coming from a religious mind frame, you can understand why these atheists are so angry. And you can see the need for that anger and that drive to go somewhere. That's all energy that we can put towards positivity, but it has to be channeled in the right way. Black. The sheep. What was it? The sheep in black. No, the black sheep in the white sheep's clothing, or something like that. It was there somewhere.
To go to Italy and go see the Mona Lisa. That was all chosen for you in a variety of different ways. You're not really doing yourselves any favor by gaining people over to the atheist bandwagon.
The few issues I'd have to raise to that.
That doesn't mean that they're not true.
So firstly, the truth doesn't have to be palatable, right? If it is actually the case, you might not have many converts to it, but if it is the case, then it just is the case. Also, some people will say that
Christians would say the same thing.
That's true, but that's the thing.
Burning in hell may not be palatable, but it doesn't convert people, right? But it's true.
And so I think, the kind of atheist materialists you're talking about say the same thing. Technically speaking, you don't have to be a materialist to be an atheist, because atheism is being without God.
Yep.
You could believe that there's an immaterial existence. You could believe in mind-body dualism, but not believe that there's a God, for example. That's another important thing to spell out. But the idea that consciousness is an illusion, I think, is pretty confused. Having said that, I haven't thought about this as much as Daniel Dennett has, so I have to temper my words.
But Daniel Dennett also uses the cop-out. If we're having the free will discussion, then we should be able to agree upon the idea that free will, what we're talking about when we say free will, is the ability to implement your agency without anything influencing that. And Daniel Dennett just kind of takes the cop-out and just calls the feeling of doing something freely, that's free will. And I think that, again, I think that's a cop-out, because even if you believe that we do actually have free will, then it's not just your feelings of doing whatever you're doing that is free will. It's your actual ability to choose to make those decisions. So, Daniel Dennett, smart guy, but
I haven't thought about this as much as Daniel Dennett has, so I have to temper my words. But I really think that's almost a contradiction in terms. There's also another sort of element that's missing from this picture. We talk about there only being the material, or there being the material, but also this like mind stuff, this immaterial thing. There's also a position that there's only the mind stuff and that the material doesn't exist.
Oh, that's good. I know my friend Stephen Phelps is out there watching, and he's all in favor of that.
Yeah.
Like, you lit up like a Christmas.
You don't exist. I don't exist. We're just thoughts swimming around, man. Your computer is an illusion, bro.
That's true. He's so happy right now.
So they call it idealism, at least in one of its forms.
Okay, I hadn't heard of that.
So it's kind of mysterious how materialists account for consciousness, but they say, like, in some way, the conscious experience is just emergent of material properties. And the idealist says that the material world is emergent of a mind. So George Berkeley is sort of the classic philosopher to think about here. He starts by sort of asking the reader to be like, it's impossible to separate the thing from your idea of the thing, right? Like if you try to imagine a tree that's just on its own somewhere in a forest, you've got the concept in your mind. The thing that's in your mind is the concept of the tree. It's not you don't have a material tree in your mind. It's the concept. And like your sense experience, you're only seeing a representation of what's in front of you.
Is that kind of like Plato's forms, like the ideal form?
Plato is sort of abstracting from objects to understand why this is a cup and that's also a cup. What is it they have in common? They're far apart from each other. They're different colors. They're different shapes. What is it they have in common? Well, they both share in this abstract thing called a form. That's a whole other thing, which I also think kind of maybe points to consciousness, but that's really interesting. But no, Berkeley is talking about you can't think of a thing without thinking of the thing, right? Nothing exists except insofar as it's being thought about. Now, I think there are so many holes to poke in this, but this is Berkeley's position. So he's like, when you see a table, you're just seeing your mind's representation of the table. You don't see the table directly. Same thing like Kant points out, you don't have direct access to the table. It's through your experience. Okay, well, the same thing with anything, and the critic says, well, I can conceive of a cup just existing on its own. And it's Berkeley's like, yeah, but you're conceiving of it. And so what you're imagining is a thought. So here comes the objection to this position. Aha, okay, well, Mr. Berkeley, if I have a candle and I light the candle and I look at it and then I leave the room and I don't think about it, no one's thinking about the candle, and yet I come back and the candle has melted. There must have been a time in between where the candle existed, but no one was thinking about it. So it existed separate from thought.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going. Somebody just shout it out if you know where this is going. So he's saying if you light a candle, right? You light the candle, and if reality is only emergent from our thoughts and from our ability to understand that is a candle, it just lit the wick, and and you walk out of the room and you come back and it's melted, then the idea that reality is only emergent from our thoughts means that there must be someone thinking about that candle when you're not. And who's that going to be? Good old God. Good old God.
Existed,
I betcha.
But no one was thinking about it. So it existed separate from thought. And Berkeley says, I still think that things only exist insofar as they're being thought about. But what you've just proven is that there is always some kind of mind thinking about everything all at once.
Ooh.
And that's what God is. For George Berkeley.
Interesting.
So
again, working backwards from there must be a God, and so that thing is the God. The fact that it cannot possibly be that physical reality exists and that I just walked out of the room. It must be that it only exists because somebody was thinking about it, and since I wasn't there, it must be God. Come on, bro.
About everything all at once.
Ooh.
And that's what God is. For George Berkeley.
Interesting.
So Berkeley thinks that God exists and the entire material universe is like a thought of God, which is kind of interesting. The Plato's form thing is interesting because there is this great mystery. Why is this a cup? Why is that a cup? Why is this a table and this not a table? It's actually a really difficult question to answer, because like there are better and worse tables. What makes a table better or worse than another one? It seems to imply that you have some idea of what a perfect table is and something.
And says, the idea that something doesn't become real until it's viewed or thought of. I think that's BS. If that's so, how come I can't think of my dream house and then it exists for me only? Yeah, I that also brings up the notion of it can't be real until it's viewed. I'm sure you guys have heard of like the double slit experiment, where they they send a single electron across the room, and it the observer effect, where if an electron can be a wave, but when you try to measure that wave, it becomes a particle. And so I would think, again, I'm not fully understanding of how all of that works, but I think that that's in line with the same thing, that there has to be a God because that observation exists. And now that I'm thinking about it, wouldn't the double slit experiment completely erase whatever Berkeley or whatever just said? Because then if the observer effect is real and an electron can be a wave, as long as we're not observing it, well, once we try to observe it, then it takes the form of a solid electron, then we should never be able to see the waveform, because God would always be measuring or looking. You just poked a great hole in that theory.
Better or worse than another one. It seems to imply that you have some idea of what a perfect table is, and something's either closer or further away from that. Okay, so will that suffice for our answer? Well, maybe, but I could say that pencil is further away from the ideal form of a table than this table is. So does that make that pencil a bad table? It's like, well, you're just thinking into things.
Wait, what?
Okay, so will that suffice for our answer? Well, maybe, but I could say that pencil is further away from the ideal form of a table than this table is. So does that make that?
So he's saying, okay, just so we understand what he is positing there, he's like, I could say that, so we got a visual cue. I could say that this pencil this pen is closer to the ideal form of a table than the actual table that they're sitting at. That would have to mean that there's something inherent about what a table is that's so abstract from what we're thinking that it would actually match that, yep, neither of them are perfect tables, but the pen is closer than the actual table. All right. Let's see what else he's got with this.
Is further away from the ideal form of a table than this table is. So does that make that pencil a bad table? It's like, what you're just thinking things into existence. So this is a wonderful position that I'm believe in called mereological nihilism, which is the idea that
one more time.
This is a wonderful position that I'm believe in called mereological nihilism.
Mereological nihilism,
which is the idea that essentially there are no distinctions.
You're making up all these words.
It's crazy. Mereology is the study of parts. So it's nihilism about parts. So I'll put it this way: do you think this table began to exist at some point?
Yes.
Okay. So probably roughly.
Right. Did this table begin to exist at some point? Well, it exists now. So yes, we would have to say it began to exist at some point. Okay.
Table began to exist at some point.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So probably roughly the time when whoever put it together,
put the legs on.
Sure. But the thing is, nothing actually began to exist, right? All that happened was a bunch of pre-existing material was rearranged.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody puts the legs on the table and suddenly something new exists. What's changed? Like, why is it that the table exists now, but 5 seconds?
It just stalled. I don't know why I remember this word so well. It was like from, I want to say middle school. I think this was my first human behavior vocabulary list. It just stalled, talking about a collection of things that is greater than its parts. So it may be true that if you had all the pieces of lumber there, nothing materially new was created, but the gestalt of the lumber just sitting there versus being in the shape of a table is what makes it a table. Aha!
What's changed? Like, why is it that the table exists now, but 5 seconds ago it didn't, when all the material is still there? There's nothing new in existence. All that's happened is it's been rearranged. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what makes this a table? It seems to just be like its arrangement. But arrangement isn't like an intrinsic property of the universe. It's something that your mind does. Your mind determines what arrangements are and what they mean. So if I've got a bunch of atoms, and I take all of those atoms and I merge some of them into the shape of a shoe, and I merge some of them into the shape of a cup, then suddenly a shoe exists and a cup exists. But all that's actually happened is I've taken a bunch of material that already exists and just arranged it and given it a label.
And isn't stuff ultimately just energy? Isn't that what Einstein was pointing at?
Anyway? That's exactly where it's coming from, is saying that energy is not destroyed; it just changes form. I think that's a semantic thing. That when we say something is created, like if you say I created a table, I don't think the implication is that the lumber wasn't there. I think it's a colloquially understood that you took the pieces and rearranged those pieces into a new thing. Right? Yeah. Like if I say I made a table, you're not expecting that I grew a tree, and you're just assuming that I took some wood and put that in a different arrangement.
A label.
And isn't stuff ultimately just energy? Isn't that what Einstein was pointing at?
Energy, like interchangeable. Right?
So so you just have energy in the shape of a shoe and energy in the shape of a cup.
Exactly. But the only thing that can determine the distinctness of those objects, if that is a shoe and that is a cup, is that your mind puts a label on it. Your mind puts that organizational label on it. So you can imagine
there have been some very low evenings in my life where I have drunk out of a shoe. So
and you're like, this is a bad cup.
This is a really stinky bad.
You're more right than you know. More right than you know. But imagine the first person to perceive anything, no experience of the universe, no knowledge of anything. They open their eyes, Adam and Eve, and they see this table in front of us. There's a cup here and there's a microphone. Would they think that there are all these distinct objects? Would they perceive one really weirdly shaped object? Would they know that this green cable is not part of the table, but that this slab here is part of the same thing as this slab? There's all these lines.
This is a very interesting because, again, for those who don't know, I am a dog trainer. And when we talk about, especially with puppies and house training puppies, it's a common thing that I have to say, you understand that you like your nice hardwood floors and the tile over here and all that stuff, and that you want the dog to go potty outside. But the dog doesn't have a frame of reference for understanding, this is inside, this is expensive ground, this is not expensive ground, this is inside, this is outside. You have to completely teach those things. And so again, the question is, if somebody just didn't know anything and they saw a table, what we know as a table with a shoe on it and a boom microphone connected to the thing, would they understand those as different aspects, or would they just think, okay, this thing is what it is? I don't know, man. That's wild. That is wild. And said, yeah, that's the part that becomes interesting. Everything we have comes from nature, whether material or supportively. Nature allows for creation. Machinery relies on nature to run too. Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, maybe maybe Alex here was just, making that point to come to this idea about separating the arrangement of things. But that definitely has an aspect of everything is nature. And even this laptop is part of nature, because humans are natural, and so on and so on and so forth. We didn't take anything out from elsewhere but nature to create all that we have. How do blind people know? How do blind people know what? How do blind people know what?
But that this slab here is part of the same thing as this slab. There's all these lines, all these aberrations, all these bumps. How would they determine what's the table and what's the paper? It requires some kind of mental distinction. So people are going to listen to this like I've lost my mind, but I promise you it's a very defensible position. But the reason I bring it up is because there's an argument from a guy called Peter van Inwagen, or the immateriality of the mind, which says this.
Materiality.
Premise one: there is no real distinction between material objects. The only distinction
there's no distinction between
material objects is arrangement and what the mind gives labels to. Right? There's no real distinction, actual distinction between material objects.
Okay, so premise one is all the stuff are just stuff. It's just one stuff. All of the stuff is just one stuff in different arrangements. I'm saying, how do blind people know what they know without seeing anything? How do they determine the existence of something if they've not seen it to visualize it? Well, I mean, we have the other senses, and so I'm sure that you could tell the difference between soda and water just by drinking it. So it definitely, when it comes to seeing something, they're just not going to know. But blinds are people too. My blinds are not people. My blinds are just pieces of plastic that cover the windows. But whatever drugs you're on, but yeah, the visualization factor is likely not there. I do remember somebody talking about this at some point. I can't recall where, when. It might just be some random person on TikTok. I don't know. But talking about visualizing things as a blind person, and I think I think the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck. I mean, not just like that, but bats have echolocation, and I'm sure it's some other mixture of using your other senses to figure out what things look like, even though you're never going to actually know. Just like Mary in the blue room, she could read everything about blue. But if that blind person were to be able to see for the first time something they know very well about, they're still going to be having a new experience. They're still going to be learning something. So, to say, how do blind people know? How do blind people know what things look like? They don't.
Mind gives labels to. Right? There's no real distinction, actual distinction between material objects. Premise two.
So again, premise one, all of the stuffs is just one big stuff.
Minds are really distinct. My mind is distinct from your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's
so all the stuffs is just one stuff, except that minds are distinct. Okay,
it's a lot smarter.
I don't know about that.
To start with,
if there's no distinction between material objects, no real distinction between material objects, but there is a real distinction between minds, that means minds are not material objects.
Okay,
because they're distinct, and material objects are not really distinct.
All right.
I mean, okay, fair, but how did you get to all stuff is the same stuff? That seems like an axiomatic thing where it's like, okay, if all stuff was just an iteration of one thing. But I don't completely disagree. Again, the idea, it's all different stuff just being arranged. But that's why I made the distinction about creation. Are we saying we're creating a new table? Because yes, that table didn't exist before. The fact of the arrangement is that existence. Ant said, have you heard of the study on autistic people and their heightened ability to read minds? I have not, but that makes sense, because it's again, going back to the crude example of Daredevil, it's a lack of one sense and all the other senses get stronger. So we're not strictly talking about your sense of hearing, your sense of smell, and just talking about having autism. Then transmutation. There you go. It makes a lot of sense that you'd be able to maybe not read minds in terms of like telepathy, but have a better understanding of unspoken things, and like be able to read energies and that kind of stuff. I have not. But that makes a lot of sense. That make a lot of sense.
Because they're distinct, and material objects are not really distinct.
All right.
It's a bit of a thinker, but I think it's got a lot going for it. But I find it fascinating, this idea that objects kind of just don't exist.
What is the best argument you've ever heard in your infinite number of debates, both online and in person,
This is gonna be
for
good.
the
Guys, really quick again, if you are new here, please do hit that subscribe button. I am live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, down in the studio, and sometimes whenever I feel like it, coming to you from the bedroom. Hit that subscribe, ring the bell, and you will never miss an Indian Jesus live party ever again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nonverbal ESP. Interesting. Yeah, it's let's see what you got.
infinite number of debates, both online and in person, for the existence of God.
There are so many. I think there's even an argument for the existence of God that can be made just from the number of arguments for the existence of God. The fact that there's an argument from beauty, an argument from contingency, from ontology, from maths, from like any way you look, there's an argument for God. So you can always make an argument for God's existence from the sheer number of arguments for God's existence.
Haven't heard that before. That's great.
Yep.
Depends what you mean. My favorite.
There's so many arguments about God. There must be a God.
For a while has been the so-called ontological argument, where you sort of think God into existence. I think it's quite fun. You can just do it from an armchair. It doesn't require any observation. I mean, that's quite fun. I mean, it goes back to St. Anselm, who is praying. He's writing down this prayer, and he sort of challenges you in a way. He says, can you conceive of the greatest conceivable being? Just think of the greatest conceivable being. So whatever qualities it has, power, goodness, all this kind of stuff, just turn it up to the maximal conceivable amount, right? And you got it in your head? You pick.
I think I remember this one. Actually, I'm not going to say it because I think I remember it. So just think of the greatest thing you can ever think of.
Goodness, all this kind of stuff. Just turn it up to the maximal conceivable amount, right? And you got it in your head? You're thinking of just the greatest conceivable being? Okay, does that being exist in reality? Here's the problem. If you say no, then you're not doing what I asked you to. Because you can conceive of.
But isn't that a limitation of the mind? I mean,
but
we talk about this in terms of the Baha'i faith, about God being the unknowable essence, and that men have created a God in their minds that they falsely worship. Right?
But we're not talking about God. We're just talking about the greatest conceivable being, which by definition you can conceive of. You just go to the ends of your conceivability.
Okay.
Now, Anselm's like,
this is not where I thought it was going.
You can conceive of that being existing just in your mind, or existing in your mind and also in reality. So if the thing you're picturing is something like a really powerful, really loving, really great being, it kind of approximates what people call God. You can imagine that either just existing in your mind as you're thinking about it, or maybe it exists in your mind, but it also exists in reality. But if it exists in reality and the mind, then it's greater. It's got more existence, right? And so when you're just asked to conceive of the greatest conceivable being, if you're not automatically thinking of a being that exists in reality, then you're not thinking of the greatest conceivable being. But because you can think of the greatest conceivable being by definition, you're automatically thinking of a being that exists in reality. Therefore, this God must exist in reality.
I don't like these arguments where it's like coming from ontology. I don't like that. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but because of the greatest thing you could possibly conceive of, if it doesn't exist in reality, then it's not the greatest thing you can conceive of. How I don't understand why that would be. Again, that comes back to our that the notion of it has to exist. I don't know. What do you guys think? Shout out to Guam Tech. Welcome to the party. It said Schrodinger's God. God both does and doesn't exist until we look and know for sure. I mean, you ain't wrong. You ain't wrong. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the party. We also got Weak Will in the building. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the party. Like this video already? Well, I'm glad you are here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And speaking of liking, if you have not already hit that like button, I would be so appreciative. And right quick, don't forget, guys, every single donation comes with a treat for Morty. I got the good stuff here. I got the good stuff here. And don't forget to look at our goal. We're going to get his own bone. Get those donations and
of a being that exists in reality. Therefore, this God must exist in reality. It's my favorite because it sounds a bit stupid.
Steven's not. You're not buying it. We can't.
He said, what about the greatest conceivable unicorn? This is the greatest objection to Anselm's. People say, oh, well, you're just thinking God into existence, because what about the greatest conceivable unicorn?
Yeah.
Like, okay, but what you've just done is limited your scope. Because I asked you to imagine the one on the mug.
Unicorn right here.
I was like, okay, imagine the greatest conceivable thing.
Get your own Indian Jesus mic at the Indian Jesus mic mug at TheIndianJesus.com. But yeah, that sounds like just being able to think of a great thing, and because you thought of it, and you're saying now that exists. So how is this different with the greatest conceivable unicorn?
Limited your scope. Because I asked you to imagine the one on the mug.
Unicorn right here.
I was like, okay, imagine the greatest conceivable thing, right? And I'm like, that thing must exist in reality.
Okay,
well, the greatest
why that part
thing, right? And I'm like, that thing must exist in reality.
Why must that thing exist in reality?
Okay, well, the greatest conceivable unicorn has limited our scope, right? There could be a unicorn that you're imagining that's greater than another unicorn you're imagining, right? Okay, we can make that unicorn a better unicorn, like giving it a sharper horn and a more beautiful mane or whatever.
Okay.
But like, even if we imagine the greatest conceivable unicorn, we can make that unicorn a greater conceivable thing by giving it even more qualities. Well, let's make that unicorn all powerful.
Telepathic. And
It doesn't make it a better unicorn, but it makes it a better thing.
Okay, great. I'm with you. You can conceive of greater and greater and greater things. Why then does that conception have to be real?
Right. And so, like,
of course, Alex doesn't believe this argument. He's presenting the argument because he's agnostic. But just according to the argument here, so you could make it a better, not even a better unicorn, but a better thing entirely.
It doesn't make it a better unicorn, but it makes it a better thing. Right. And so, like, the question is, does the unicorn existing in reality make it a better unicorn than just existing in the mind? And it seems like kind of not really, because the things that make a unicorn great.
Okay. So he's saying, so that goes back to there's more to it. If it not only exists in your mind, then it exists in reality. If we take that to the unicorn, then we can make it a greater being, but it's not necessarily a better unicorn. And somehow that means it exists. What? Let's try one more.
It makes it a better thing.
Okay.
Right. And so, like, the question is, does the unicorn existing in reality make it a better unicorn than just existing in the mind? And it seems like kind of not really, because the things that make a unicorn great are things like a nice mane, a pointy horn and stuff. And the one in your head has all of those things. It has all of the things that are the great making properties of a unicorn.
What?
It's all in the one that you're thinking of. And if it existed in reality, I don't know if that is a better great making property of a unicorn, right? Whereas if you're asking about the greatest conceivable thing, then you're maximizing all the properties, not just the unicorn making properties, but all properties a thing can have, including levels of existence.
Okay, so I understand that if we're talking about a unicorn, then conceiving of the greatest possible thing doesn't necessarily make a better unicorn, just makes a better thing. When we're talking about a God, and we're talking about the greatest conceivable God, I'm still not understanding how the conception part actually makes it something that exists in reality. I think maybe what the argument is saying Oh, are we back? Oh, I just had something. It was so brilliant. Hold on. Damn it. Worst possible timing. Let me see what he said again. Oh, I'm so mad that just happened. Thank you, Big Will. All right, let's
making properties, but all properties a thing can have, including levels of existence. It's a bit much.
Oh, fuck, I lost it, man. I lost it. So then, if we're trying to conceive of the greatest possible thing, then yes, it would make that thing better to exist in reality because there's more of the existence. I'm with that. So you can say, if God is the greatest conceivable thing that exists in reality, okay, sure, but that still gets us back to what is that thing? I mean, you know, sometimes it do be like that. It do be like that. Yeah, right? Because I agree. I agree that if you can conceive of a God and it has all these amazing things, that's one thing. But if that God actually exists in reality, that does make it a better God. Where that's not necessarily the case with the unicorn. I'm still stuck on how the conception of it has any bearing on what actually does or does not exist in reality.
Like it's why I sort of hesitate to bring it up because it is my favorite, but it's a bit difficult.
But let's continue on that because what comes to my mind, and we discussed this when I was on your pod, is I tried to be an atheist.
Yeah,
and I really spent a good couple years at least just really trying to exist in a world that inherently didn't have any meaning to it.
And that is where they all go wrong. That is where they all go wrong. Anybody who's told you, yeah, I had an atheist period in my life. Oh, when I was younger, I was an atheist, but then of course I found myself back to God. Anybody who's going to say something like that is not, they're conflating atheism with something else. Atheism is not the notion that the universe has no meaning. That's nihilism. And you can go and believe in nihilism. I actually think nihilism is a good step to getting towards absurdism, where you can be okay with the fact that there's no meaning to the universe. But that's not what atheism is. And so if you are taking away this true belief that I find meaning in X, I find meaning in my work, I find meaning in my family. If you are then saying, okay, I'm going to be an atheist and pretend those things don't matter, you're doing it wrong. That's not what it is. Now, that may be, don't step on the mouse, please. That may be a part of it, believing that there's no meaning to everything, but that is not a necessary aspect. And so that form of atheism may not have been what was fulfilling to you. And I would understand that. That doesn't mean that God exists. That doesn't mean that God exists or that Christianity is right. Meek Will said, very hard to bridge the gap between atheism and nihilism emotionally. Yeah, I agree. And the fact of, especially if you come from having religion and believing in God and God's plan and all that stuff, and then that's taken away from you, I can understand why you go to, okay, well, nothing matters because everything was about God. And if there's no God, then there's no nothing. But there's still all of those other things. If you care about your work, you're still doing your work. You still have your family. You still have the rest of the world. You can look up and see the stars. There's plenty of other things that have meaning. And I think that is the biggest thing. It's like I tried to pretend like nothing matters. Like, that's not what atheism is. That's not what it is at all.
Didn't have to exist in a world that inherently didn't have any meaning to it, or didn't have,
I'm not surprised you came back.
Have any kind of transcendent power beyond what could be kind of determined through scientific diagnosis.
And so, I mean, even if you're including love in that, which I think is the most powerful thing that we can all agree exists, you believe in that love. You believe in those transcendent things. That's not the same thing as a God, unless you're going to say that anything that is not anything that exists that is not a material thing is God, which I guess you could say that, but that doesn't match up with the Bible or Christianity. And so to take a step back, hopefully this demonstrates the frustration of an atheist who does have a spiritual life, who does believe in the transcendent, having all these assumptions to fight back before you can even say, well, this is what I believe. before I can even get there. There's 17 different ideas that are plastered to me that don't actually apply to me. And so to actually get there, we've got to have somebody who's not only willing to hear me out, willing to understand that it's going to be different. It's not what they believe, but that's what, and smart enough to be able to hold two different worldviews, all that kind of stuff. It's difficult. And he said, "How are you having trouble with this? It's also very elementary, too easy for people like myself." Yeah, I mean, hey man, I never ever claimed to be as smart as King Nirvana. Weak Will said, "Nah, the unicorn part and conceptualization thing has me confused." Yeah, it's out there. I mean, I would love to hear it in the context of, like what those people actually, what these people were actually, like what their bottom line was with that whole thing. Because I'm sure there's interesting stuff there, but out of context, it's just a little confusing. We having a ball. That's why it's a party. Let's dive back into the party.
On what could be kind of determined through scientific diagnosis. And it just didn't add up to me. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't work.
Because that's not how the world works, bro.
Work for me. It just didn't add up. I mean, I guess, what's the famous watch on the beach analogy of God?
Yeah, the teleological argument.
Yes, that if you're walking along a beach and you see a perfectly functioning Swiss watch, you're not going to go, "Oh, wow, all of these elements just fell together here on this beach and created this beautiful, perfect watch that's incredibly," you'd be like, "There's someone made the watch."
Yeah.
When I deeply imagine a three-dimensional universe made of,
right, but so the first thing is, so we can see and we understand how nature works. So if you see a Swiss watch, you're not going to assume it just happened there. What are you going to assume? You're going to assume that somebody put it together. Okay, how did that somebody get there? Okay, you keep going back and back and back and back and back, and if you get to, well, God did it. Okay, well, how did God, how did that start? The infinite regress. Weak Will's loving it. Weak Will's loving it. Said, "Cook. Let's let him cook. Let's let him cook."
Perfect watch. That's incredibly, you'd be like, "There's someone made the watch."
Yeah.
When I deeply imagine a three-dimensional universe made of, energy, but, matter and atoms and dark matter, and there was a big bang, and there's galaxies, and that it just happened. It just existed. It just sprang into existence, and that there are, physical laws, and then somehow out of that chemistry became biology, and creatures were created, and there was paramecium, and then there was, little amoebas and whatnot, and then they evolved into creatures, and somehow we have a creature and we have a large consciousness, and we're having this conversation over this podcast. When I think of the totality of that, without any kind of greater power or energy, it doesn't make sense to me.
That is what we call the argument from personal incredulity. I can't understand how this could happen, therefore it must be God. Kind of personal incredulity and God of the gaps. I don't get it, therefore God. That's not how logic works. And just because you don't understand it, and when I say you, I mean you as humanity, just because we don't understand how the universe got here or how the Big Bang started or any of those things, doesn't mean that there's not an answer. And the more we say, well, it just doesn't make sense without God, then how are we ever to figure out what exactly that is? As we've been discussing this whole time, we don't really know what God is. We know that there's something, but if we're not willing to explore that, then we're never going to know. We got, weak Will's eating it up, baby, eating it up.
Not just on a cognitive level, it just doesn't make sense in my heart. It doesn't make sense in my life experience. When I picture all of that with some kind of greater unknowable energy beyond time and space coursing through it, it makes total sense to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So does that go hand in hand with what you're talking about a conception of God? Because you can say, try and conceive of a universe without anything other than stuff and the properties that govern that stuff.
There are two things to say here. One is that, like,
I would jump in, but I think Alex has got this. I think Alex has got this way better than I can. But let's grab this from Weak Will first. Said, we don't even know what logical voids there are to fill. We don't know what we don't know. Smart words. There's the things that we know. There's the things that we know that we don't know. There's the things that we don't know that we don't know. I missed one. The things that we know we don't know, and then the things that we don't know that we don't know. You got it. Spot on.
The properties that govern that stuff.
There are two things to say here. One is that, like,
because Alex was ready here.
Can we understand how things like emergent conscious experience just appear in this universe if there's no God? But also, can we understand how there's like complexity without some kind of creator? On the first point, I saw a video the other day of a...
And said, well, it can be how logic works because logic is subjective. If it weren't so, the theory wouldn't exist to be identified. I disagree that logic is subjective. Where's subjective logic? What is that? What would be an example of something that is logical in one context, but that same thing would be not logical in a different context?
Creator. On the first point, I saw a video the other day of like a CPU in a computer, this tiny little microchip zoomed in on a microscope, and it's incredible. I mean, they are so tiny and just packed with little electronic functions, and I genuinely just don't understand how computers work. I do not understand how people get a bunch of like metal and copper and stuff like this, and sort of arrange it in a particular way, and you're able to sort of produce like
you're able to watch this video on a YouTube channel, like beamed over.
Like all of this is just because people have put atoms in the right order, doing things that now people can like hear the words that we're saying.
Instead of a table or a shoe, it's a computer.
And, but it, like, and I'm like, that is an unfathomable mystery to me. Like, am I like if I saw a computer for the first time, and I was playing chess with it, and it was talking back to me, and it was connected to the internet, and it allowed me to speak to my mother halfway across the globe or something, right? I said, what on earth is this? Like, if you showed it to someone 200 years ago, they said, what is this magic? What is this sorcery? And you said, oh, it's just made out of like, metal and zeros and ones. They would literally just not believe you. They'd be like, that. I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. But the computer is in fact reducible to those metal objects just clanging into each other and producing this orders of magnitude more confusing, amazing.
But there weren't a bunch of molecules in a shoebox and you shook them up. No, and then it's like monkeys writing Shakespeare, and then you pull it out and there's a laptop.
By the way, they've actually done that research. Somebody put some monkeys in a room with a typewriter. It turns out that they don't type randomly. They had like a fondness for the letter F.
Oh, no.
So you probably wouldn't get Shakespeare even with
No monkey Shakespeare. What are we going to do without monkey Shakespeare?
But
that's cute.
Like, so the other problem. So there's firstly, like, can this all be reducible to the material? I struggle with that. I think that would be incredible if it were the case. But I think it's incredible to imagine that computers can do that. But we know that they do. The other question then is, where does that complexity come from? No matter whether you can create these incredible emergent things, why is there that complexity? Who put it that way? And of course, the problem with the watch analogy is that we don't believe that complexity, like biological complexity, just came about, just popped into existence. We believe that it evolved through natural selection.
That's a big one. Understanding the notion of putting the watch there and finding a watch is skipping the millions and millions and millions of generations of animals that or species that were extinct and had mutations and all that stuff to become the animals that we are. So human logic is conditioned and critical thinking. Cognition is the mental process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experiences, and the senses. Right. So what was right? Like I don't know. Y'all know this about me. I don't remember everything that I just be saying shit, and I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on. But logic being subjective would mean that there is a logical statement that could apply to a scenario in certain cases, but not another. And so I'm just asking for an example of that, because maybe I completely agree and I just don't understand what you're saying. So if you can give me an example, then I could say, oh, yeah, okay, I agree. Weak Will said, no, philosophers all around the globe just winced. I think he's saying the whole Earth life cycle is the watch rather than humanity alone. The whole Earth and life cycle is the watch rather than humanity alone. Yeah, pretty much. Just like intelligence and intellect are different. Okay, I agree there. but still, if you could give me an example, that would really help me out.
About, just popped into existence. With complexity, like biological complexity, just came about, just popped into existence. We believe that it evolved through natural selection. And so it'd be as if you saw this watch that was incredibly complex. And then you discovered billions of years of watches which somehow were able to reproduce themselves. And every time they reproduced, they had slight differences. Sometimes they ran a little faster, sometimes a little slower. And for some reason, whichever ones were closer to accurately recording the time were more likely to keep reproducing.
Yes, but if there's also
that would sort of do away with the mystery of it.
But if there's also the second law of thermodynamics that says that everything is going to be falling apart
in a closed system. Oh my God, this is the Christians' favorite science. They hate the science, as we all should, but everybody loves the second law of thermodynamics. That does not apply to an open universe.
Of thermodynamics that says that everything is going to be falling apart. Why is there an impetus towards life and ever-increasing complexity?
Because that applies in a closed system. And of course, we're constantly getting extra energy from outside of the Earth, given the sun. So eventually, this will all have to come to an end and we'll sort of die in a heat death. But for now,
so if you just have an air-sealed bottle of whatever, eventually the factors in there will break down at some level, or however that works. But the fact is that that works in a closed system where there's not energy being I don't fucking know thermodynamics, but it has to be an open system. So entropy is inevitable in a closed system, but not just in general.
Entropy being extra energy from outside of the Earth, we get it from the sun. Right. So eventually, this will all have to come to an end and we'll sort of die in a heat death. But for now, entropy can go in the wrong direction in isolated pockets, and that's something like what's happening on Earth. But it can't go on forever. Is probably the point. But I don't want to just dismiss it, because it is a powerful consideration. Why is there something rather than nothing? How do we explain this complexity? We can explain the complexity of biological organisms, but we can't explain the complexity of the fine-tuning of the universe, those constants. That's something that's outside of our purview.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem as if, well, why would you want to ask how the universe started, or any of these big questions? The point here is not that it's silly to ask these questions because we don't know. That is furthest away from the point. The point in asking these questions is to demonstrate how far we are from a reasonable level of what we could imagine human understanding could be capable of. To think that right now, today, whoever the smartest person in the world is, that's as far as humanity is going to go. I mean, maybe believe nothing except that anything is possible. Maybe we just all blow ourselves up, and whoever's the smartest person, they're the smartest person that ever lived and ever will live. But we need a reason to believe that human advancement wouldn't continue.
The complexity of the fine-tuning of the universe, those constants, that's something that's outside of our purview, and that's still a mystery. But I would just remind people to keep in mind that there can be things which are inconceivable and yet are the case, like the reducibility of computers. For the person 500 years ago, they literally just wouldn't be able to comprehend what you're talking about, because even to be able to organize.
Right, yeah, if you say, what did you say, 500 years ago? So because a person 500 years ago wouldn't be able to conceive of a smartphone, that doesn't mean that smartphones don't exist today. And how do we know that a common understanding of what we can all call God, how do we know that isn't 25, 50, 100, 1,000 years away, as long as we are still searching, as long as we're not saying, nope, we figured it out, it's just Yahweh? I don't get it.
500 years ago, they literally just wouldn't be able to comprehend what you're talking about, because even to be able to organize metallic objects on that microscopic level for any reason would have been impossible to them, let alone doing it in such a way that brings about a perfect representation of somebody across the globe who can then talk back to you. They just would not believe you. They would not believe you. And yet it can be done. There are greater things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Which would always consistently point me toward the divine. But what would it take for you to become a theist?
I don't know, but God does.
Would it take increased understanding? Would it be an argument? Would it be some kind of scientific proof, on some kind of,
I personally wouldn't need like empirical, like again, there's a lot of things that I believe in, that I have faith in, that I can't either articulate or argue for. Just those things have ways of being potentially demonstrated. Like if we go back to, I almost caught myself. I almost said, and again, if we go back to love, then the situation where I would do something for someone that I typically wouldn't do for anybody, that is a demonstration that there is a bond there. And then when that aligns with the feelings that I do feel more positive feelings about this person, that gives me all the reason I need to believe in love. That doesn't mean empirically that we've located, okay, yep, love exists right here, and technically it starts when you feel this, and then it goes into, I don't know, what would be like a toxic love, like stalkering, you know what I mean? It doesn't have that defined thing, but I still believe in it. And so you don't need, we all have these things that we believe in. Just don't understand why God is one of them. Will said, I believe empirical proof of God is literally mathematically impossible to be presented to humans or to any being that is not God. Okay. What leads you to believe this? I don't know. But again, just like with the smartphones, if you went back 500 years, they would say exactly this about, if you just talked about the functionality of an iPhone. They would say, I think it's mathematically impossible that we'd ever be able to have all the information in the palm of your hand. There's just information comes from books and da-da-da-da. They didn't understand technology and the digital aspect. So how are you in that same position and know that you're correct? It makes sense that this may be the reality. It may be. I'm not saying you are wrong. I'm just not sure how you could possibly come to the conclusion that that is actually the case. Because what did you just say before? You don't know what we don't know. It could be something we discover tomorrow.
On some kind of, molecular level, or some kind of string theory or unified theory or something like that, being proved, that kind of has a light bulb go off for you? Or would it be some kind of lived experience, some kind of transcendent experience that you had with either psychedelics or falling in love or through tragedy or a vision? Or would it take some combination of all of those? Or could it ever possibly happen?
For me, it definitely could happen. But the problem is that I would have, exactly what Will is saying about what we have about understandings of God today. If I were to have an experience with God, how would I check that that's not, a hallucination or an experience with that can happen when, you do these series of events and you're in this state of mind? And how do you know that the experience of feeling like you're talking to God isn't just a confluence of physical, biological factors? I don't know. I'm trying, man. Ant said, my job. I am tech focused. Others in my role are business focused. Trying to fix HTML cookies is dependent on a multitude of components that will ultimately fix the whole if prepared individual. Oh, we got more. All right, we'll come back to this when we got more. We got the whole thing.
Some combination of all of those, or could it ever possibly happen to you or someone like you?
I think it would be the second. I think it would be an experience for a few reasons. The first is that I think that the most plausible of traditional religions is probably a form of Christianity, because I think it has the best historical evidence, especially if you don't need to swallow the idea that Jesus is God. He's just like all this kind of stuff. I think that's kind of plausible.
Oh, yeah.
And within Christianity, it's quite clear that the way that people come to God is through experience.
Why Christianity over Islam?
I think it has better historical case for the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus.
And that is why he is not going to DebateCon, because he said that, and now they all want to come. No, I'm just making that part up. But yeah, I got the email. I'm so mad. Because I've met him twice, and I've got his email and stuff, but he's got queries from everybody. I figure maybe third time's a charm, right? All right. Am said, my job, I am tech focused. Others in my role are business focused. Trying to fix HTML cookies is dependent on a multitude of components that will ultimately fix the whole if repaired individually. To me, based on the architecture, dependencies, processes, etc. Okay, so all that is for you. Okay. Trying to fix the cookies dependent on a multitude of components that will ultimately fix the whole if repaired individually. To me, based on the architecture, dependencies, processes, etc. But to others, the answer is assigning to one group to fix all. We all received the same info, but came to a different conclusion based on that information. The example is the mechanism for thought resulting in bias. So, okay, and so this is about. This is going back to us talking about logic itself being subjective. So, what I think you're talking about here is that there are two logical conclusions. So, your logic is not illogical. It just is. It's not subjective whether your way of fixing it. If it does fix it, that is logical. That doesn't mean that's the only logical way to solve the problem. So, I mean, let's, because I've held off on doing a specific Google, but is logic subjective? Let's see. Okay, so AI said logic. All right, we're gonna have to go over to my big here. Oh, sorry. Logic can both be objective and subjective, depending on whether it's based on objective standards or personal opinions. Okay, personal opinions. That's okay. I got that. So objective logic based on logical standards that are independent of personal feelings and opinions. That's kind of, especially when we're talking about religion and we're talking about this kind of stuff. When I'm talking about logic, I'm thinking like the logic of an argument. So let's get more into these. And look at my little, they gotta come on. There we go. So this is my, that is the main way I used it. So also, logical realists believe the laws of logic are objective, also known as absolute truth. Subjective logic, based on reasoning without objective standards, known as relativity truth. Those concepts, judgment. Okay, example. There you go. A person's emotion state can limit logic's ability to describe the real world. I would call that not logical then. Communities where power structures determine truth instead of objective reason. But again, in here, if we're talking about like the ministry of truth determines that the sky is green, then that's not that is the capital T truth, not reality. So let's go over to ChatGPT. It depends on how we're talking about it. So subjective logic does exist. The logic that we're talking about in terms of making an argument for the existence or non-existence of something, that is objective logic. So that's a different thing. But I guess it can be subjective. Weak Will said, I think it's a good point that proof of God could be hallucination, but I was thinking even more along the lines of anything more powerful than humans. If God is defined as a being that is infinitely, then no, you're good. I'm trying to see what we got here. But I mean, if you were going towards, if God is defined as that which is infinitely good, then we kind of get into a regress. So let's jump over to, give me 1 second so I don't dox myself. Chat GPT. And of course, every single time when I try to make sure that it doesn't pop up. Okay. So, what do we want to say? So, when making an argument for the existence or non-existent instance of a thing, does this incorporate both objective and subjective logic, or only objective? Let's see. It depends on the nature of the argument and the type of thing being argued for or against. A little bit. You're making an argument for the existence or non-existence of something in an objective sense, like a physical object, historical event, or a scientific phenomenon, then the argument should rely primarily on objective logic. It includes empirical evidence, reason, and deductive or inductive reasons. However, if the argument involves things like moral values, aesthetic judgments, or personal experiences, i.e., does beauty exist? Does God exist? Then subjective logic may also play a role, as individual perspectives, interpretations, and beliefs become part of the reasoning process. That said, even arguments that incorporate subjective elements can still be evaluated with a logical consistency. A strong argument, regardless of its foundation, should aim for internal cohesion, and if possible, some external validation. So there's definitely so subjective logic is definitely a thing. I'm going to ask a little bit further on this subjective logic. I'm talking about God. I want to fully understand. But it seems like it's not that simple, right? Shout out to Jacob Oliver. Welcome to the party. So the words of Jesus in red, regardless of his proof, are good stuff. I've always felt if we focus more on those and less on the virgin birth, we'd all be better off. I said, shit. Me too. Well said, and welcome to the party. We also got Master Maverick. Welcome to the party. Said logic is subjective is the dumbest statement I've ever heard. Yet we just showed how, in fact, it is a real thing and can apply if the argument involves things like moral values, aesthetic judgments, or personal experiences. Example: does beauty exist, or specifically what we were asking about, does God exist? Then subjective logic may also play a role. So, continuing with that, then. Did I miss? I think I missed one of you guys here, right? So answer, there's definitely different types of knowing. We could ask it for an example of subjective logical argument. That's where we're going to go. Yeah. Master said law of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle are no way subjective. Right. So that's what we're talking about. Those things are objective logic. But as Am has clearly been shown correct, subjective logic also exists. And so if we talk about we want to take abortion. If you are using the logic, the subjective logic that you believe that the choice is ultimately with the mother, then it is logical to say that that woman should have the ultimate choice up to 9 months. If you go based on the logic that it is not her body, then that is a subjective way to address it. So let's dive back and ask a little bit more specific of a question here. Say, okay, so I am specifically talking about the existence of God. In what way is subjective logic used to demonstrate that God either does or doesn't exist? So I'm specifically talking about the existence of God In what way is subjective logic used to demonstrate that God either does or doesn't exist? Answer: when arguing for or against the existence of God, subjective logic comes into play in several ways, particularly because God is often framed as being beyond empirical verification. There you go. Well, we were just, as you were just saying, arguments for God's existence using subjective logic. Personal experience. Many believers cite religious experiences of feeling divine presence or miracles as evidence. These are subjective but can be compelling to the individual. Pragmatic justification. We all know Pascal's wager. All right, against problem of evil. But okay, so I just want to take this one example then. So let's take personal experience. So, because I don't think that, so if we take the example of personal experience, how is it logical to use one's personal experience to make a claim? As long as use one person to make a claim about an objectively existent. That's a word, right? No? Yeah, an objectively existent God. So what I'm asking here, if you've had a personal experience that's made you believe in God, what part of the logic there? Because we're using, if I said I feel like, because that's what personal experience, I feel like it's raining outside. I could feel like it's raining outside because Morty's acting weird and he usually shivers when it's raining. But that doesn't mean that's a logical thought. But that doesn't mean it's raining. You know what I mean? Personal, yeah, that's what I'm getting to. Personal. Oh wait, I missed one. Master said I can have rationality that a mother can choose if she aborts because of bodily autonomy, but that isn't logic. That is rationality. Okay, I'm with that. Personal experience isn't logic. No, definitely epistemology. As the logic is very defined, you're confusing it with reason. That's yeah. See, that's what I'm thinking. So let's ask about that specifically. Well, actually, first, let's see what it said. So again, the question was, so if we take the example of personal experience, how is it logical to use one's personal experience to make a claim about an objectively existent God? So using personal experience to argue for an objectively existing God is a form of subjective reasoning, which can be persuasive to the individual, but weak as an argument for universal truth. And I think that's really the heart of what we're doing here, is talking about the objective truth and not what do you feel like. Shout out to Luke Meyer. Welcome to the party. So I'm curious what your explanation is for our moral compass and what is right and wrong. Why do we think so? Have you ever heard of narcissistic altruism? You can get it's a theoretical thing. It's not a practical thing, but theoretically, you can have a moral structure where, because all I ever care about is what's best for me, I can get to altruism. And on a very basic level, I am a person who doesn't like being hit. I have pain receptors, so I don't like being hit. Now, I can use that logic or reason, whatever the fuck we want to call it for this moment. But I can use the idea that, okay, if I don't like getting hit, then other people probably don't like getting hit either. And so since I don't care if other people get hit, but since I don't want to get hit, I'm not going to hit anybody else, because then they might want to hit me. We go down the list for stealing and being mean and all these things. And at the end of the day, what we're always talking about when we talk about morality and right and wrong is the spectrum of behaviors and ideas that goes from the greatest suffering for as many, the greatest number of people, to the greatest well-being for the greatest number of people. So that I think is objective based on the agreement, the social agreement on what our American, standard, the Western world, whatever you want to say, what that is. So it's not unchanging necessarily, but I do think it is objective. Master Maverick said, if I say the coin must be heads because it's not tails, that would be logic because of excluded middle. But if I say I think it's head because I feel like it, that wouldn't be logic. Subjective reasoning is not logic. I think I'm going to go with that. That is a better articulation of what I was trying to say before, and I think the confusion is that. So I'm not gonna say that subjective. So what is this last part here? Yeah, we were talking about. Okay, so how to use inductive reasoning from experience. Person claims to experience God. They infer that God must exist based on this experience. This is similar to how we infer the existence of external objects. I see a tree, therefore the tree exists. Right, but then if you just say, I see a tree, therefore a tree exists, that doesn't work. If you say, I see a tree, and she sees a tree, and they see a tree, and they can touch the tree, therefore the tree exists. So, okay. I mean, so clearly it's not as simple as yes or no. There is logic or there's not subjective logic. Clearly, subjective logic is a thing. But I think in the context we're talking about of what objectively exists, I think we want to stick with the logic that is for objective stuff. Whether I love my my dog, my family, or whatever, that there's reasoning and logic behind that, but that's a different type of thing than what we're talking about. But that's definitely a good thing to clear up. I'm glad that you brought that up, man. Answer logic can be subjective and still employ consistency and be rules based because epistemological ways of knowing include subjective and internal processes. Duh. Fair enough. I will concede. Weak Will said logic is just like math. I think of logic gates and shit. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Before we dive back into the video here, Master Maverick says from ChatGPT, logic itself is generally considered objective in its structure and principles. It is based on rules and relationships between concepts, such as the principles of valid inference. So they, it really depends on the context that you're talking about. So given the fact that we are talking about the existence of a God, and the question specifically was what would be an argument for God, we were then talking about objective logic. Epistemology is a segment of philosophy. Logic is a branch of philosophical thinking. Agreed. All right, let's dive back into that. That was a good side quest. Thank you, Em. That was, I agree with Weak Will. Em should speak. That was a good side quest. Let's dive back in here.
It's quite clear that the way people come to God is through experience.
So again, the question was, what would it take for you to believe in God?
Why Christianity over Islam?
I think it has better historical case for the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, both of which Islam denies.
So you would need a miracle like a resurrection to kind of prove to you the divine truth of Christianity?
No, I think that if the resurrection...
Again, even if there was, how and when I know that that's actually what's happening? Talking about laws of the universe, Clarke's third law, I think was it thermodynamics? No, not thermodynamics. I don't know. Clarke's, whatever the fuck Clarke had laws about. Clarke's third law. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indecipherable from magic. So if I were to see something, my assumption would be, oh, there's, Mysterio is doing something before, oh, God exists.
Have proved to you the divine truth of Christianity?
No, I think that if the resurrection of Jesus happened as it was recorded, that would be a pretty good indication that there's something really special about this Jesus guy, and we should be taking what he says very seriously. Like Muslims will say the same thing, that Jesus is a very serious guy who needs to be taken seriously, but they don't believe he was crucified. So if we knew that he was crucified and resurrected, we'd know we'd need to pay attention to him, and in a way that Muslims have misunderstood because they don't believe in that. Of course, I don't believe that Jesus did rise from the dead. I think that there's better evidence for that as a historical case for this like worldly religion than there is for other world religions.
Okay.
I might be wrong about that, but I do think personal experience is the way to bring it about. Even in the Christian tradition, people come to belief through experience. The disciples see the miracles. Jesus himself arguably is a visionary. When he's sort of at his baptism, he sees the voice of God.
The dove. Yeah.
And interestingly, the only place, if it's not just a vision, I think the only place where the Trinity is all physically present. You have the voice of God,
baptism?
the voice of God, the Father vibrating the air. So the voice, you've got the dove as the Holy Spirit, and you have the Son there as well. They're all physically present.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Because if all that happened to me, again, I would just assume it's something I don't understand. So again, going back to subjective logic, I think that it has to do more with personal experiences and or subjective claims. There we go. Subjective claims. So if you're claiming something subjective, then you can use subjective logic. But if you're claiming something objective, then subjective logic shouldn't be enough to convince other people, though it could be strong enough to convince yourself. Again, we're in the context of talking about other people knowing that this thing exists objectively. So I think that's where we got our wires crossed. Subjective logic is a thing. I don't think it's the right type of logic for trying to understand these questions. Luke said, what about selflessness and why anyone would sacrifice their own well-being for another's and feel good about it as a result? What about it? What do you mean? What about selflessness and why anyone would sacrifice their own well-being for another's and feel good about it as a result? I mean, some people swing that way, you know what I mean? No, I mean, I think if you give to charity, if you do something nice for somebody, that has, again, talking about the feeling good part, the fact that it feels good for you is the driver. And it doesn't need to be about actually being altruistic. It's enough to say, I feel good when I do this, so I'm going to do it.
Present in this space. Paul's vision of Jesus is a bright light, and Paul also elsewhere talks about going up into the seventh heaven and having these visions. It seems like there's something about experiencing the living Jesus that brings people to faith. The other problem is that if God does exist and is the kind of God that wants you to know he exists, it'd be a very weird place for him to hide his existence, like in like premise 48 of one of Ed Feser's 200 premise arguments for the existence of God. If I'm going to turn a page and turn it and then go like, there he is, I found God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Maverick, I don't think it does exist. I'm just saying that's why theoretically you could get to altruism from narcissism. We can also what if there is an alien that can perform every biblical miracle, but it's not the creator of space-time and doesn't have infinite power? Then there's an alien that's 1,000 times more powerful than them, etc., etc., etc. Exactly. And until we can prove that it's not this and that it is Yahweh, then there's no objective logical reason to believe in Christianity. If people want to do it for their own subjective reasons, that's perfectly fine. I don't want to stop them. All I want to do is establish that that is your own subjective thing, and that doesn't necessarily comport with objective reality. Well said, Will.
I'm going to turn a page and turn it and then go like, there he is, I found God.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, it tells me that am I supposed to think that people who are like me, who are convinced by the same kinds of things as me, but don't have the time or the education to read an argument like that because they're too busy being a single mother?
Yeah, of course. We have masters as do people die for causes they perceive to be greater than themselves, their own survival, i.e. die for the freedom of democracy of their state. Yeah. Yep. Very important word. It may map perfectly onto reality, but that doesn't mean that it does. Very deliberate. We got to be very deliberate with those words. Thanks again for the likes, guys. Very much appreciated.
To read an argument like that because they're too busy being a single mother, bringing up a family somewhere, and they haven't got time to just sit around reading books, that they're not going to meet God because, they have to sit down and read this 200 premise syllogism. That would seem totally unfair and academically elitist, which doesn't seem in keeping with the character of God. I would expect that the thing that convinces you of God's existence would be a religious experience of some kind, but that if you do want to do the syllogisms and the arguments, God's there too, of course, because God's everywhere. And if you're interested, then yeah, you'll find him there. But that's not what it takes to believe in God. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then it's also true that maybe God just meets you where you're at. Like if you are an analytical person who likes argument and debate, then that's where God will place himself for your discovery. But if you're not, if you just care about having a nice time with your friends and your family and loving each other, then that's where God will place himself to be discovered too.
Okay, and then, what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? Maybe he doesn't exist. Then that is altruism without personal gain, isn't it? Means you have no reason to conclude altruism doesn't exist. I mean, I just see shitty people. I'm not making the distinct claim. I'm just saying I don't think that true altruism exists. I don't have an objective argument one way or the other. So Alex is one of the only few and fair, honest atheists. Me too. Me too. I indeed am an atheist. Well, I mean, depending on what we're talking about, I might be just agnostic, and I'm always agnostic. But when it comes to Christianity and all that other stuff, I'm an agnostic atheist. But when it comes to the question of God, I am agnostic because I may believe in God. I just don't call it that or know that it is. No, yeah, I'm an atheist. I have a very high respect for what Christianity has done for our society. I just don't think that those good things need to be tied to the very, 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 very not good things and the things that are untrue.
And with your friends and your family and loving each other, then that's where God will place himself to be discovered too. So it's possible that I would discover him in argument, but if I did, I don't think that would be a universal course that everybody should take.
Well, and in my case, and in so many people's cases, God comes out of anguish. So your only hope left is to be on your knees and throw out a lifeline, and you then have an experience of God because you feel like you're going to die if you don't have it.
You'll feel like you have an experience with God, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough to feel like you've had an experience with God. But my question is, does that God actually exist? Cheap. What do you think, guys? Should I check that out? Wonder why I stopped streaming to Twitch.
And have an experience of God because you feel like you're going to die if you don't have it. I haven't had a vision of the divine, but I've had an experience of the divine in terms of it. I was lost and now I'm found. I was blind and now I can see.
I'd want something that is an experience that I can identify is an experience of God or divinity, let's say, that is distinguishable from what I would expect to feel if I were like a confused ape subject to hallucinations. Because like when I meet people who've had religious experiences and they say like, I spoke to someone just the other day who said that she met Jesus, she gave him a hug. And I'm like, I can imagine somehow your brain tricking you into that experience or something, maybe, I don't know. But if I met Jesus physically embodied, gave him a hug, and afterwards was convinced that that's what actually happened, even if my brain was just going haywire, there's just no way that I'm going to just dismiss that. I'm going to believe in Jesus, right? And so if that happens, then it happens.
I think that's easy to say. Now, but I question that. I question that. If you were to hug somebody that was supposedly Jesus, how all of his skeptical thinking of how do I know that this is Jesus? I think that would come in, and he may accept that I think that this is Jesus, but I don't think that he would say, I can use objective logic that you should believe this is Jesus. Going back to what he said about personal experience. Master Maverick said the best reason to believe in God is that the greatest pathway to self-realization and the ennoblement of being is to posit the highest good that you can conceive of and then commit yourself to it. Believing in the highest good that and okay, but how do we, again, this is my issue with the word God, because Rainn Wilson here was just talking about how God is, I don't remember what the fuck he said. God is he didn't say God is, I think he said God is truth. People will say God is love. Some people say God is just the connection that we all share. I don't like that word, and so when it comes to this, I'm agnostic on this. Maybe, but how could you ever say that for sure? Master goes on to say, for example, man initially believed no human can run 100 meters in less than 10 seconds, but once it was broken, we believed we could do it. It was broken many times directly afterwards. Right, and so I feel the same way about whatever limitation we have on the understanding of God. And even if, let's say definitionally, God is outside of human understanding. So I just use the camera and the framing. So let's say God is right up here. It's close to us, but we can never get there. And, if you are into one of the organized religions, then, you can get up this close to God, which is pretty damn close, right? I am not just like the 100 meter in 10 seconds. How do we know that there's not something that can bring us closer? Maybe we can't ever get there, but how do we know that we can't go from here with Christianity to here with something else? In the same way, we thought it was impossible for somebody to run 100 meters in less than 10 seconds. Some people are saying it is impossible for humans to comprehend God. So the first question is, Jacob, how are you aware of the limits of human comprehension? What is the limit of human comprehension, and what is your understanding of God that places God beyond that? This is two things that you don't know. If it's beyond your human comprehension, then you can't possibly be able to know that it's beyond human comprehension. You could say beyond your comprehension, but just like the runner, that was beyond all human comprehension. Didn't mean it wasn't possible. So I agree, it is possible that God exists. The question is, how do you know whether it's within the realm of human comprehension or not? My guy did not sign up for this shit, man. Merrick said, I am not saying a religion is necessary or a specific religion. I'm saying belief in the highest good you can fathom will enable you to reach your potential. I can definitely agree with that. All right, let's finish this up.
Just dismiss that. I'm gonna believe in Jesus, right? And so if that happens, then it happens. So it needs to be an experience, but it also
was it
needs
a metaphorical hug or an actual tangible hug?
As far as I know, she like actually like people report.
And
like,
what was he wearing? Was he wearing contemporary clothing or like an Aramaic robe?
That's the thing that's annoying. I didn't get a chance to ask because
I'm hungry, guys.
What do you mean? Like, did he knock on the door? Did he appear?
How
Like,
tall was he? Because wasn't the historical Jesus probably like 5'1"?
We don't know, but there is an interesting. You know, Zacchaeus has to climb up a tree to see Jesus because he's short. There's a story.
Jesus is short or Zacchaeus is
That's the
short?
question. It's ambiguous in the Greek. I mean, it's quite clear. Like, it's probably implied as Zacchaeus, but just interestingly, it could be the case. You know, the Greek sort of
the average height back then.
But even for average, because it says that like Jesus is preaching, and it says that Zacchaeus had to climb up a tree because he couldn't see Jesus because he was short. And the implication is that Zacchaeus is short, but it could mean
that Jesus is short
as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting reading of that.
And the implication is that Zacchaeus is short of a tree because he couldn't see Jesus because he was short.
He couldn't see Jesus because he was short. Who's the he?
And the implication is that Zacchaeus is short, but it could mean
that Jesus is short
as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's quite fun. We don't know, of course.
Which is another reason why the Pharisees didn't buy Jesus as the Messiah.
Yeah, well, it would be in keeping with the idea of Jesus being born into a sort of life of poverty and being, you know, ascetic and all this kind of stuff. Because maybe he was a short king of the Jews.
Short king of the Jews. Sebastian Junger, who's a dyed-in-the-wool atheist, who had a near-death experience. Did you get to read his book? It's a fabulous. It's called In My Time of Dying.
No, I haven't. But I was just about to ask you about NDAs.
And that's what I wanted to ask you was, here is a dyed-in-the-wool atheist who had an NDE, had a vision where he saw his father next to him in the hospital room when he was essentially...
So he wouldn't be able to be, on drugs and hallucinate somebody that he knows. Okay.
Dead. And he had this vision of a large black space opening up and pulling him in. And his father kind of imparted to him, like, I'm here for you. I'm going to be your guide and I will show you around. It was.
Yeah, I like this, Master. I think this is this or a very close iteration of this. If we can have a story around why these things are important that can be thread through the American culture, then not only will we not need religion, but we also won't have as strong of a group of people who want to push back against religion. A lot of leftism, a lot of that hedonistic bullshit is a direct pushback against religion, and it's not because all of these things are bad or wrong. There's other things that are bad and other things that are wrong. And we need everybody on both sides to be able to say, okay, maybe you don't believe in, if you're a Christian, you need to be able to look at secular people and say, okay, maybe you don't believe all of this is completely accurate and true, but it's got all of these values in it, and these are the values that are best for society. Then on the other side, if you're an atheist, You can understand, okay, maybe the stories that you believe in are not exactly true, but what they do for society is important enough that we need to tie it together. And again, that's where I'm at, trying to figure out what is that story that a secular person, a non-believer, can hang on to feel like we are all part of the same team. Not as easy as it seems. That's agreed, but they push back against the whole of religion, which has its pros and cons. Only cons if attachment is too high and extreme. Well, yeah, and that's the dogma. So dogma is, I think, bad in all cases, but religious dogma is strong because it has an organization to it. Whereas, leftist dogma, there's the establishment of the government and our institutions and stuff, but they're not specifically driven towards these leftist dogmatic ideals. That's just where they're at right now. So it's definitely something that we can turn around. Where again, the church, we can't turn that around, but we don't need to. We just need to bring it far enough away from politics that that this doesn't happen. The pushback.
I'm like, I'm here for you. I'm going to be your guide, and I will show you around. It wasn't a typical like angel of light and tunnel and loving family gathered around, and it was. Oh,
it's absolutely organized, but it's not organized from the top down. They organize, but what I'm saying is that it's not a there's not the same. It's just the difference between how leftist dogma was created versus religious dogma. They're both dogma. They're just two different kinds. Shout out to M169. Welcome to the party. So I think we can find truth in biblical stories without thinking all of it is 100% real. I agree. And I think if everybody was willing to, that's exactly what I was saying. If everybody's willing to take this type of approach, then I wouldn't need to have this channel at all. But 100% agreed, and welcome. Always good to see you. Master Maverick said, leftist dogma has no base axioms. For example, if Science Tomorrow said abusing your children is good for them since it makes them more resilient, etc., then they have no base axiom to protect against such. How does that differ from divine command theory? Because if God said tomorrow the exact same thing, they would have no axiom to protect against such, right? So I see them as two sides of the same coin. And I mean, we're going to keep with the analogy. Tails never fail. So Christianity can be the tails, but leftism is the head.
And
love that up. Think about if you change that. Instead of saying leftist dogma, think of divine command. Well, so I'm thinking about 2 subjects ago, but damn, I love this topic. Got it locked in again. Well, hey, I got my side quest banner. So in case you're bringing something up and we got to take a side quest, we could take a side quest. We are here for you guys. Rick said, divine command stipulates the sovereignty of an individual, unless God says so. That's why Abraham was willing to kill Isaac. That's why. Okay. Maybe it has base axioms, but what is the base axiom that would prevent somebody genuinely believing that God told them they should go kill somebody, which has happened many times throughout history? What is the base axiom that would say, even though in general you shouldn't go around killing people, God commanded you to do this thing, but there's something else that would say that you shouldn't? So what is the protection? Again, if I believe that God is telling me to go kill somebody, what is the base axiom in Christianity that would prevent me from wanting to listen to God? Because like what you're saying here, divine that we're all divine, but then why has God done that before? And why do people listen? And why is it good that people listen according to Christianity? Shout out to water. Let's all take a water break. Water break. Boom, 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 boom. That's what it's all about. Master said they wouldn't have understood what Jesus taught. Whoa. So are you saying God is incapable of commanding somebody to kill another person? I don't think so, right?
It wasn't a typical like angel of light and tunnel and, you know, loving family gathered around. And, you know, it was a little bit scary and off-putting. And his father was an atheist too. So he was kind of having this vision of his father going like, wait, you're an atheist and you're here. What the hell is going on?
Like Virgil.
Oh yeah. Okay. I forgot. We were talking about the near-death experience. So this guy was on the operating table and saw a vision of his father.
Bring Dante around the Inferno.
Right. A little bit.
Yeah.
I'll be your tour guide.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found so interesting in Sebastian's book is he drills down into the science of near-death experiences. And he has a lot of explanations about how people could have them under anesthesia and how certain dopamine releases happen, ketamine releases happen when the brain is shut off, and there may be manufactured.
So this is why we need the side quest banner. So Master said they wouldn't have understood what Jesus taught, and God doesn't command us individually, collectively through Christianity. Why did God do it before? Old Testament God was operating out of revelation. He revealed himself. In the New Testament God operated out of faith and hid himself. In the Old Testament God gave commands, but then changed to guidances in the New Testament, which correlates with how we raise children. Fair, fine, take all of that. What I am asking is if, for just hypothetically, we knew for a fact that you got a message from God that said your neighbor is going to do something terrible if you don't kill him. This is coming directly from God. Are you saying that is something that is impossible, and that God cannot do that? How do we know that whatever? Again, this is coming from the understanding that we had the Old Testament and then the New Testament, and then that's all. How do we know that there's not going to be more revelation? Yeah, I mean, we initially give out children rules. You don't talk to strangers, but when they get older, you have practical examples. We change law to a guidance. Be careful of the company you keep. Okay, so let's just stick with the specific hypothetical. God comes to you tonight and says, you have to kill this person. If you don't kill this person, not only are you going to hell, but the world will fall. And you know this is from God. What reasoning do you have to ignore God? Unless you are saying, because of the New Testament, God is not able to have this type of request. And so political ideology in general is one of the most important and predictive variables in human psychology. I mean, yep. I mean, I wasn't ever Trump or came around, but most people, you can tell, was good.
Anesthesia and how certain dopamine releases happen, ketamine releases happen when the brain is shut off, and there may be manufactured visions. You know, you perceive time in a different way, et cetera, et cetera. But he said, but the one thing, when you explore NDEs, and you explore them in every culture of the world and every time period of the world, is this idea of ancestors and family appearing, reaching out their hands and saying, come with me, I've got you. And there being a sense of great love. And that,
if not more, because at least religious people have the dogma in another quote unquote authoritarian. I'm using that just to keep with the language, but yeah, agreed. We will say, you know how chess has lines, like famous opening lines and sequences? I think debates should have lines, and I think I found a line, but it could be flawed. All right, let us know. What's that? What would be the lines?
Come with me, I've got you. And there being a sense of great love, and that kind of defies science. Why is that in every culture in the world? If you go to the Pygmies, you know, if you go to the Mongolians, why is there this consistent, persistent vision of loved ones showing you around.
Mm.
And I was just wondering, for you, and in your thinking, because going back to that question, what would it take for you to become a believer? Do you have thoughts on NDEs? Have you spoken to anyone about those kind of visions?
You're gay. So yeah, exactly, Master. I'm saying, is it moral to kill a German dictator in 1945 who's about to kill 6 million innocents? Yeah. But you wouldn't know that because you're not God. So you don't know that he's going to do that. So let's say the next Hitler is your neighbor and is going to start with not 6 million and said, fuck it, I'm gonna double it. 12 million, let's go. Why would it be wrong for God to tell you to kill that person? As I said, because God can predict the future better than we can. God can command that and be right. Exactly. So that was my whole point. That's what I said. And you said, no, there's an axiomatic, there's a base axiom that will prevent people from doing that. God would know, so his understanding is better than mine. Exactly. So there's nothing that would prevent you. That's exactly my point. So God knows better than you do, according to you. So if God came to you and said, you need to kill your neighbor tonight. What axiom do you have? Okay, I would say, God, but dear God, can you kill him yourself? Why ask me? Because I need you. That's it. I need you. What would you say then? It has to be you. And again, unless you are saying, you're going to say, God, nah, that's not valid. I mean, who are you to tell? Nobody said he couldn't, but he's asking you. Maybe you don't believe as much in this God as you think. If he were to come to you and you knew it was God and he would tell you to do something and you're just like, you go do it yourself. That's a very weird way to think of a God that you supposedly worship and believe in that has that power. I mean, yeah, okay, good one. So God asks you, how can I do it to myself? Wait, he can do it. Wait, what? He can do it to himself? Wait, he can do it himself. All right, now we're just throwing out quotes. I don't know. Again, what is the thing that would prevent you from? God already comes to you. You said this is the axiom. The axiom is say, but God, why can? But dear God, you can kill him. Why ask me? Are you claiming that if you don't understand God's reasoning, that you shouldn't follow him? You have to understand exactly God's plan before you follow it? Or do you follow God's plan because you believe that he knows better than you do? One or the other. Can't be both. And so, again, I don't know how strongly you guys actually believe in this stuff. We're literally creating the perfect example where you have there's no need for the plausible deniability that, something can go wrong. No, we know for sure in this example that it's God. We know for sure that he needs you. He said to you, I need you to do this. You asked him, why can't he kill him yourself? And God has a reason that's beyond your understanding. Are you saying that can happen or that you wouldn't do it? Or you would do it? It's one of those three. You let me know. You let me know.
Do you have thoughts on NDEs? Have you spoken to anyone about those kind of visions?
I've never met someone who's had an NDE. I'd quite like to, because I have a lot of time for this. Like a lot of atheists.
There we go. There we go. So in the same way that the leftists will do whatever because the state insisted and the experts said and the science says, they will do it. That is dogma. Now, again, I think, having a dogmatic belief in the Christian God is way better in so many areas for so many reasons than leftist dogma towards the state. But they are both still dogma, and they both do not have an axiom that would prevent anybody from doing evil. Guante said, I'd ask God why, if he's already going against his own rules, that I should believe anything else he says from that point. And he says, you'll find out when I meet you at the gates of heaven. I thought one of the central tenets of this religion is that God knows so much better than we ever could. And so whatever God says is right. God works in mysterious ways, no? Rules were meant to be broken. Why would it be such a horrible thing to break one rule if it leads to something better? I'm just saying, it's the same thing. The same thing.
Just like to, because I have a lot of time for this, like a lot of atheist skeptic types, just sort of, even if they don't really know exactly why,
we are past the 2.5 hour mark. There's about 25 or so minutes left of this. If you want to keep the party raging, guys, you know how to do it. See, Morty's right here, like, yo, I gotta piss.
Like, and they're not well accounted enough. They're not replicable in a scientific study. So I have a lot of time for this because I think it's fascinating. The fact that so many people are at least convinced that this happened, especially in the case of veridical experiences. You know, the famous one with the shoe on top of the building.
Right.
And somebody just rose above their body. And they
By the way, I do think that you could conduct scientific experiments on near-death experiences very easily. Mm-hmm. They've had what you're referring to, they've had little stabs at it, but you could have a hospital center.
Yeah.
And you could, on the roof, unbeknownst to anyone, above, surgery or ER or whatever, you could set up different patterns or shapes or something like that, and don't let anyone know, week in, week out. And then if people have near-death experiences, they can say the.
Okay, so what about saying a child? That would be moral if there was some way that beyond our understanding, God says, okay, I need you to SA this child. You can't both say, we can't comprehend God and all of that, and then also say, oh, God wouldn't do that. You can't have both of those positions. That's the point. I don't think that if that God does exist, that God would ever do that. That's not the point. The point is, where do your allegiances lie? And exactly that thing about a base axiom that prevents people from doing horrible things. There's one way to get a good man to commit atrocities, and that is dogma.
Was a red triangle on the roof. I'm like, no, there was a blue circle on the roof. You could literally prove the existence of NDEs.
I suspect that if that happened, then the immediate response would be people would suspect that they had somehow heard that there was this thing on the ceiling, that the doctors thought they were in a coma, and so they were talking about it. Oh, I wonder if we'll see the red triangle on the roof. Even if that's not actually what happens, I just imagine there's so much room for suspicion there that it wouldn't be enough to convince people. I think when people talk about science, the key thing is like replicability. So you would need to have the same result shown over and over again, which could potentially happen if you had someone changing the roof, but the methodological constraints would be big. You need to make sure that nobody knew what was on the roof. Maybe you could like randomize it. You could have like a screen which randomly switches between images.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And you can look in retrospect.
Which like a big LED screen.
Yeah.
And you can
like
have
that.
it in 20 different hospitals at 20 different locations around the globe.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think there are ways that you could do that, but it would take a long time before there was enough. And also, you never know when an NDE is
There's any
going to happen.
billionaires watching right now that want to fund this study. Then
I mean, it wouldn't be expensive, would it? You just put something on the roof, We could just go and do it like if we, get a ladder or something. Just pop upstairs.
But more thoughts on NDEs.
But like they are an incredible mystery, especially in the case. I mean, people who sort of say, I saw my family members, I saw this kind of thing. Especially if somebody was kind of already confronting the idea that they might be about to die and thinking about, especially if they're predisposed to being religious, this guy is not, which is what makes it a little more interesting. But, the idea that you might see your family, it's like, well, what would you expect your mind to start inventing? Probably something like that, which is why I think it's really cool and interesting. But I'm much more troubled by the veridical experiences. I saw this thing that I shouldn't have seen, that I could only have seen if I floated above the room. The problem is that those don't have, I think there are accounts, but they're a little bit patchy. Like I'm pretty sure the shoe on the roof thing or whatever. Like
no, there's thousands of accounts like that. I heard this conversation, or I knew this person, and saw someone in the hallway doing X, Y, and Z. And
yeah, but like, guys, have you ever been on anesthesia? Have you ever been on anesthesia? That's that you gonna get some kooky thoughts. Trust me. Guantek said, if God is breaking his own rules, then why not take another step outside of that and showing me proof? Otherwise, it's not my fault that I'm disobedient at that point. So fuck whatever heaven you're offering, and if it operates like this. Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agreed. Because you would have no way of knowing, because you are making the assumption that he's breaking his own rules. You are making that assumption because there could be a I don't have one off the top of my head, but there you could have, again, if we're going back to the killing baby Hitler or whatever, there are situations where what would seem, based on the knowledge that we have, is one thing, but with the omnipresent, omniscient God, it seems that way, but it's not. I swear it's not. It doesn't look. I know it looks bad, but it's not. Like those things happen in earthly things. But yeah, that's exactly. This is precisely the type of thing that pushed me over to the edge. Pushed me over the edge to say no. I no longer am. I can't believe in this, because exactly what Guamtek is saying. A God couldn't do that. That I would want to worship. But it's not impossible. So how do I know that that isn't exactly what God is? Believe nothing except that anything is possible. Weak Will said, 1, God is beyond human or any comprehension. 2, how do you know the limits of human comprehension? I thought that was, yeah, these are the questions I was asking you. So how do you know the limits of human comprehension? And how do you know if God is beyond that limit? Maybe God could show you that it's powers, but how could you confirm God? Exactly. Are you saying God of an infinite power is incapable of infinite will? No, you would need that to be an infinite reviver of energy. I'm a little lost, but I think we're on the same page. Master Maverick said, I don't know what that called. Something OR experiments via anesthesia give solid evidence for a quantum consciousness. I'm okay with that. Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hamroff. And we're going to come back to how do you know? How do you know? How do you know? And that's, that seems to be where I all of these, okay, it's a scientific theory. Thank you. But that's where I seem to end up in all of these discussions. All of these discussions making a claim that based on your own framing of what God is, you couldn't possibly know that. You couldn't possibly know the limits of what God is willing and not willing to do. Parents don't teach their kids to typically to drink alcohol, but that doesn't mean they don't do it. Yeah. So, I mean, I remain unconvinced. If you, I highly suggest, if you think that, maybe in over voice, it would be easier to discuss this stuff, join the Discord. It's absolutely free to join. You do have to be a member for the after parties and stuff, but we can go and talk about this all night and day. There's a bunch of other people, and most of them are Christians, so they'll probably have your back before they have mine. But yeah, I love hanging out with you guys in the Discord. So please come on and join. So I am going to knock out of here. It is Sunday, right? So I'll be live tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, guys. Make sure you come through. If you are new here, please do hit that subscribe. I would very, very much appreciate it. And of course, if you have not already shared the video, plaster that bitch everywhere. YouTube, Twitter, wherever. And again, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if you think other people are going to click on the link. Just by you hitting share, just by you sharing it, it tells YouTube to kick this into the algorithm more. So thank you so very, very much. All right, all right, let's see if we can try this one more time. First, we had Master say, I'm not a Christian in the Orthodox sense. I believe in reincarnation. Cool. All right, so 1, God is behind human or any comprehension. The numbers are confusing me, because sometimes the number is the thing that I'm saying, and sometimes the number is you answering a question. So I'm confused what the numbers have to be, or what they respond to. So again, just going through this, if you are making the claim that God is beyond any human comprehension, then you have to understand what the limit of human comprehension is. In the same way, 500 years ago, it was beyond human comprehension to understand what a smartphone was. Everybody now knows it. How do you know that there won't be something in the future, in 500 years from now, that allows us to understand what God actually is? And then, yeah, the number 2 is the reason why number 1 is not a proper argument. 3, even if God could show you his powers, how would you be able to confirm that this is God? Yep. This goes back to the Clarke's third law. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So even if all of that stuff was happening to me, then it could just be Mysterio and his drones. 4, are you saying God of an infinite power is of infinite will? No, that you would need to be an infinite receiver of energy. I don't know exactly what that means. All right. Quantek said, sometimes you just tell God that it's his fault he gave us free will. The world ends because I didn't do something he told me, and then he created a weak-ass world. It says more about him than it does about me. Well, I can't think of a better place to knock off than there. I hope you guys took as much from this as I hoped would come from it. It's difficult to find places where people get in this far down in the weeds about theology or stuff like that, and it's not just a debate. And y'all know I love a blood sport debate, but it's big ideas and it's tough. And when people are going directly at making the arguments, you don't get a lot of time to break into them and see what does this argument actually mean. So I hope that if nothing else, you guys understand where I'm coming from a little bit better. And look who we got. Zippy DSM Lee. Welcome. Said, God is a drug. Don't do drugs, kids. Yep. Big ideas. That's what we're here for. So please do hit that subscribe. And I will, again, be live tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, always Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, and sometimes whenever I feel like it. And my co-host is always with me, always ready for treats. Guys, this is Morty, and I have been Lutch, a.k.a. the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Until next time, guys, we are out of here. Peace.